Chapter 1. On their 8th anniversary, Chen Mo wanted to give Ye Zhaozhao a surprise. He'd specifically taken time off from the dance troupe and went to her company. However, when he arrived at the entrance to the president's office, he unexpectedly heard a strange young man's voice. "My thesis is so hard to write, Sister Zhaozhao." It was a very pleasant voice, with a hint of a spoiled tone. Chen Mo was taken aback. Then, Ye Zhaozhao's voice came, "Don't worry, I'll help you." That gentle, coaxing tone was one Chen Mo was once most familiar with. He pushed the door open and walked in. He saw Ye Zhaozhao wasn't sitting at her desk, but on the sofa nearby. Beside her sat a young man in a clean shirt. Ye Zhaozhao was leaning over, looking at his computer. They were positioned very closely to one another. Seeing Chen Mo enter, Ye Zhaozhao paused for a moment and then naturally stood up. "Chen Mo, what are you doing here?" Chen Mo didn't reply but instead looked at the young man. He was very young, about 20 years old. As he looked at him, he found the boy vaguely resembled himself 8 years ago. Noticing Chen Mo's gaze, Ye Zhaozhao introduced, "This is Ming Shun, Yin Lung's younger brother. He's interning at our company. Yin Lung asked me to take care of him." Suppressing the strange feeling in his heart, he nodded. "I came to ask you out for lunch." Before Ye Zhaozhao could speak, Ming Shun suddenly stood up excitedly. "Brother Chen Mo, I really like you." Chen Mo didn't react at first, but then he saw Ye Zhaozhao chuckle at the young man's fan-like behavior, and then explained to him, "Ming Shin also studied classical dance." Chen Mo was the youngest principal dancer in Yun City's classical dance troupe. Countless dance students considered him their idol. Hearing that they were going out for lunch, Ming Shin immediately spoke up, "Can I come along too?" Under normal circumstances, Chen Mo would naturally have agreed. But today was their 8th anniversary. Before he could say anything, Ye Zhaozhao ruffled his hair. "You little foodie. Let's go. Your sister will take you to lunch." Since Ye Zhaozhao had spoken, Chen Mo naturally couldn't object. So he smiled agreeably and said, "All right, let's all go together." And so, their planned date for 2 instantly turned into an outing for 3. Inside the restaurant. "No ice cream. Eat less dessert. Why did you order 2? You're only allowed to have 1." Ye Zhaozhao strictly controlled the menu Ming Shun had chosen. Like a very responsible, older sister, Chen Mo tried to find reasons for her behavior in his mind. Watching as most of what he wanted to eat was crossed off the list, Ming Shun pouted, looking a bit unhappy. Seeing that he was silent, Ye Zhaozhao proactively said, "You can have milk tea when we get back to the company later." Hearing that, a smile returned to Ming Shun's face. For a moment, Chen Mo felt like he was the extra one at their 8th anniversary lunch. He quietly watched Ye Zhaozhao's various gestures of care toward Ming Shun. Familiar. He was so familiar with each of her actions. Because once, she used to do all of that for him. 8 years ago, Chen Mo was 20 and Ye Zhaozhao was 22. She was a free-spirited playgirl, a socialite who flitted between relationships. He was a stoic, handsome college student, dedicated to his dance and uninterested in love. Their paths only crossed during Ye Zhaozhao's graduation ceremony, where Chen Mo, as a younger student, performed a dance. Then he caught the attention of this socialite, who began to pursue him relentlessly. Chen Mo's parents had divorced early in his life. He was a loner, and from the bottom of his heart, he didn't believe in relationships, so he had no intention of dating. But Ye Zhaozhao's advances were too overwhelming. She, who never had any patience for boys, seemed to be determined to have him. She stubbornly pursued him for a full 6 months. She would ask him out to eat, remember all his dietary restrictions, and if he was experiencing stomach pain, would silently buy him more medicine. She would attend every one of his competitions, and every time Chen Mo won an award, he would immediately receive flowers from her own hands. She would set off fireworks throughout the city for him, reject all other boys for him, and her heart and eyes would only see him. Chen Mo's heart wasn't made of iron. He was moved. After they got together, Ye Zhaozhao completely settled down, and they'd been together for 8 years. 8 years ago, during their dates, he had enjoyed Ye Zhaozhao's meticulous care. 8 years later, during their date, she was paying more attention to another young man. Chen Mo snapped back to reality just as the waiter arrived with their food and accidentally spilled hot soup on Meng Shun's arm. Ah! Meng Shun yelled out in pain from the burn. Ye Zhaozhao's expression immediately changed. She angrily said, "How did you do that?" Seeing Meng Shun's face turn pale from the pain, without even saying a word, she hurriedly left the restaurant with him. She completely forgot that her actual boyfriend was still sitting at the table, staring blankly as Ye Zhaozhao's back disappeared. A moment later, the manager walked over, pushing a cake. It was an 8th anniversary cake that Chen Mo had made by hand. He had asked the manager to bring it out mid-meal, wanting to surprise Ye Zhaozhao. But now, looking at the empty seat across from him, the manager was put in an awkward position. He was even holding a large, happy 8th anniversary sign. Compared to the current situation, it all seemed ironic. "Mr. Chan, this?" Chen Mo forced a stiff smile, still maintaining his composure. "Give the cake to your staff." He picked up his belongings and stood up to leave. Stepping out of the restaurant, looking at the busy road, he suddenly felt a void in his heart. He suddenly remembered on their first anniversary, Ye Zhaozhao had rented out the entire restaurant for him and had flown in over 1,000 roses. Chen Mo didn't like making a big fuss, telling her not to make it so grand. At the time, Ye Zhaozhao had held him, saying, "But Chen Mo, I love you, and I want the whole world to know it." In those years, whether it was his birthday, Valentine's Day, or any other anniversary, Ye Zhaozhao had always put her heart and soul into celebrating with him. But from the last 2 years onward, Chen Mo had clearly felt that she wasn't as enthusiastic about these celebrations anymore. Often, they would just have a meal together and that was that. Having stepped out of the passionate frenzy of their courtship, they were gradually returning to a state of normalcy. He had comforted himself that this was something that every couple would experience. But he never imagined that the woman who once said that she wanted the whole world to know she loved him would one day forget their anniversary. He went home alone and went to take a shower. In the misty haze of the bathroom, for the first time, he didn't go straight out. Instead, he stared blankly at the full-length mirror in the bedroom. The reflection he saw was of a man with broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and handsome, refined features. However, another face flashed through his mind, just as beautiful, but with eyes full of clarity, energy, and spirit. Something that he no longer possessed. No one stays young forever, but someone is always growing younger. Just like Meng Shun, who was 20 years old. When Ye Zhaozhao got home, it was almost 10 o'clock at night. She had been at the hospital taking care of Meng Shun. Even after she got home, her mind was still on Meng Shun at the hospital. She made several phone calls. "The wound can't get wet, understand? If you need anything, ask the nurse. Don't move around on your own." Chen Mo listened quietly as he hung up the coat she had taken off. Suddenly, he noticed a few candies in the pocket of Ye Zhaozhao's suit jacket. Lychee flavored. Just then, she finished her call. "Aren't you someone who doesn't like candy?" He opened his palm, revealing the candies he held. Ye Zhaozhao glanced at them and then naturally put the candy back in her jacket pocket. "Meng Shun likes them. I kept them in case he got bored during meetings." Chen Mo was taken aback, suddenly remembering that when he was younger, before every performance, she would often carry a few of his favorite mint candies in her pocket. "Good boy, if you have a candy you won't be nervous anymore." When had the mint-flavored candy turned into lychee flavor? He didn't say anything, his mind wandering. Ye Zhaozhao could tell that he was upset, and she suddenly took his hand. He only snapped back to reality when he felt a cold sensation on his left wrist. Looking down, he saw Ye Zhaozhao putting a delicate bracelet on his wrist. It was exquisitely crafted, clearly of high value. Ye Zhaozhao hugged him, her warm breath brushing his ear. "Chen Mo, I'm sorry. Today is our 8th anniversary, but I wasn't with you." She had finally remembered. She paused and then added, "Don't mind Meng Shun. He's young, and Yin Long personally entrusted him to my care before she went abroad. I had no choice but to take care of him." Chen Mo's hands, which were hanging at his sides, clenched tightly. In the end, he only said, "I understand." Ye Zhaozhao kissed him on the forehead, assuming the matter was over. She then turned and went into the bathroom to shower. Chen Mo remained where he was, his heart far from calm. In the past, whenever he was even slightly upset, she would do everything she could to comfort him. Once, after they had had a fight, Chen Mo wanted some time alone and didn't answer her calls. As a result, she immediately took a 10-hour flight from the United States to return to him. But now, even when she was apologizing to him, her insincerity and calmness were so obvious that Chen Mo couldn't fool himself. Ye Zhaozhao, she really seemed different than before. Chapter 2. Chen Mo felt like he had a large rock in his heart, pressing against his chest and making him feel stifled. On the weekend, a close friend of Ye Zhaozhao's was getting married, and they were having a bachelor party. Chen Mo went with her to attend. When they walked into the private room, there were many familiar faces inside, including even Meng Shan. But as soon as Ye Zhaozhao saw him, she walked over with a cold expression. "Who let you come to a place like this?" Meng Shan's innocent air was indeed out of place there. "My sister is out of the country for work, so I came to represent her in giving a gift." Ye Zhaozhao's expression softened somewhat, telling him repeatedly not to drink. Only then did she return to Chen Mo's side. Chen Mo silently suppressed the strange feeling in his heart as he watched her care for Meng Shan. At that moment, the party's protagonist arrived. Everyone began congratulating him, and Chen Mo's attention was diverted. Everyone began drinking and chatting. "I really didn't think that you, of all people, would be the first to get married." "That's right. I always thought Ye Zhaozhao and Chen Mo would be the fastest." "Yeah, it's been 8 years. It's about time you two got married." Chen Mo forced a stiff smile and turned to look at Ye Zhaozhao. As expected, she was calm, as if she hadn't even heard. Marriage was a taboo topic between them. He had proposed to her 3 times before, and each time had failed. After turning 26, Chen Mo started thinking about marriage. But Ye Zhaozhao had never mentioned marriage, so he took the initiative to propose. The first time was on his 26th birthday, and she had said that they weren't mature enough and needed to wait longer. The second time was after she had secured a major project, and she had said that the company was busy and they should wait until things calmed down. The third time was half a year ago. She had told him, "Chen Mo, I'm a non-marriage person. I truly love you, but I don't want to get married." Ye Zhaozhao had said that, except for marriage, nothing would change between them. "Let's just stay like this, okay?" And so, he had gone along with her. He had continued to go along until he turned 28. Chen Mo didn't want to participate in this topic anymore, so he got up and went to the buffet table to get dessert. He was leaning against the table, just as he took a bite. A young woman with good looks and a tall stature walked over. Her gaze toward Chen Mo was clearly filled with admiration. Chen Mo was a standard handsome man with 3-dimensional, handsome features and a cool aura, the kind that was most likely to arouse a woman's desire to conquer. "Handsome, can I ask for your contact information?" The young woman went straight to the point. Chen Mo glanced at her. She was clearly new to this social circle, not even knowing his relationship with Ye Zhaozhao. He was about to speak when several of Ye Zhaozhao's friends who had also witnessed this scene walked over, laughing. "Sister, you're serious?" The young woman was taken aback, not understanding what they meant. They jokingly led her in front of Ye Zhaozhao. "Sister Sue, this person just said they wanted to pursue Chen Mo. What do you think?" They started laughing. It was then that the woman realized Chen Mo already had a significant other, and it was this famous socialite. The woman's face went pale, and Chen Mo also frowned and quickly walked over. He knew how terrifying Ye Zhaozhao's possessiveness was. She had never tolerated any other women near him. Once, an ignorant girl had confessed her feelings for him. She had had her ribs broken by Ye Zhaozhao, who also prohibited her from appearing before Chen Mo ever again. These playboys were doing this on purpose, wanting to see a good show. Chen Mo was just about to comfort Ye Zhaozhao, but saw that she was completely calm. She only glanced coldly at the woman. Not only did she not make a move, she didn't even say a word. Chen Mo stopped in his tracks. But then, the next moment, Ye Zhaozhao looked up and saw Meng Shan at another corner of the room, also being harassed by a woman. Her entire aura sank. She stood up and walked over. "Little handsome, just tell me your phone number." Bang! The woman hadn't even finished her pickup line before being kicked a meter away. The whole room fell silent, shocked at what had just happened. Ye Zhaozhao was now standing, shielding Meng Shan behind her. Her expression was dark, her eyes were terrifying, and her voice was cold. "Do you have a death wish?" Ye Zhaozhao had learned Taekwondo before, and she was ruthless in her attacks. It was as if she felt that one kick wasn't enough. She was practically beating the woman to death. In an instant, the large private room became chaotic. There were sounds of fighting, people trying to mediate, and various glasses shattering. Meng Shan shrunk into a corner, scared and crying. "Sister Zhaozhao, I'm scared." At that moment, Chen Mo, who had been trying to hold Ye Zhaozhao back but hadn't been able to achieve much, felt that Ye Zhaozhao had frozen. She immediately stopped what she was doing and turned around, seeing Meng Shan's red eyes. Ye Zhaozhao pushed through the crowd and went straight over to comfort Meng Shan, who was still crying. "Don't be afraid. I'll take you away right now." She covered Meng Shan's eyes and gently took him away, without even sparing Chen Mo, who was off to the side, a glance. He stood there, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. The two scenes of Ye Zhaozhao violently attacking the woman who had approached him and gently leaving with Meng Shan flashed repeatedly in his mind. Seeing that those around him were starting to whisper about the situation, he didn't want to face this scene. So he calmed himself and turned to leave. But when he went outside, he realized that it had started raining at some point. Looking at the rain, Chen Mo was reminded of a rainy day many years ago. His divorced parents had finally taken time out to spend a day with him, but they got into a car accident and both passed away. Since then, Chen Mo had been left with a fear of rain and cars. He even hadn't dared to learn how to drive. He always took taxis, but there were always places where it was difficult to get a car. Until he met Ye Zhaozhao. No matter where he was going or where he was going home, she would always appear in front of him at the appointed time, giving him the most reliable sense of security. Chen Mo stood at the entrance of the club, lost in thought, until he heard a car horn nearby, and a Maybach suddenly stopped in front of him. A charming woman holding an umbrella got out of the car and walked up to his side. "Chen Mo, why are you all alone here?" Hearing the voice, Chen Mo looked up and saw the tall, graceful woman standing in front of him. Meng Yanlong, Meng Shan's older sister. Had she returned to the country? Thinking that she had heard about Meng Shan's situation and had come, Chen Mo nodded politely to her as a greeting. Then, he said, "Meng Shan is fine. Ye Zhaozhao just took him away." Unexpectedly, Meng Yanlong frowned at this. She didn't ask about Meng Shan, but instead focused her gaze on his bruised ankle. "You're injured?" Chen Mo hadn't even noticed. He must have injured it by accident. "It's just a small injury. It should be fine." Unexpectedly, Meng Yanlong's expression grew even colder. The next moment, she threw the umbrella at him. Before Chen Mo had time to be surprised, she locked the car and disappeared into the rainy night. When she returned, she had cotton swabs and medicine in her hands. With a cold expression, she took off Chen Mo's shoe and gently applied the medicine to the wound. Chen Mo couldn't help but twitch his foot. She grabbed it again. After that, he didn't dare move again. He wasn't that familiar with Meng Yanlong, and Meng Yanlong was known as a cold beauty amongst the young elites. She always treated everyone coldly. Although Chen Mo had actually met her first during their university days, and they were in the same club, because it was only for a short time, they were barely acquaintances. After he had started dating Ye Zhaozhao, he had almost no contact with Meng Yanlong. He never imagined that Meng Yanlong would actually treat his wound in person. Luckily, other than treating the wound, nothing else happened. After she had finished applying the medicine, she threw the cotton swabs away and naturally started the car. From the beginning to the end, she hadn't said anything, but she drove him straight to Chen Mo's apartment complex as if she knew where he lived. It was only when the car stopped downstairs that Chen Mo finally snapped back to reality. Although this person was extremely domineering, he still had to thank her. "Thank you." Meng Yanlong hummed in acknowledgement and drove away. Chen Mo thought that she was still as cold as always. That night, Ye Zhaozhao came home very late. As soon as she returned, she apologized. "Chen Mo, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you behind today. It was just too chaotic there. I was worried about Meng Shan." Chen Mo was much calmer by now, and he just looked at her quietly. Ye Zhaozhao, don't you think that you're taking too much care of Mingxin? He had only been approached by another person, yet she had lost her temper and had practically ruined the party. Are you trying to make sure no other woman goes near Mingxin? Ye Zhaozhao was startled. I was asked to look after him. He's still young. I'm worried about him getting tricked. Many emotions rose up in Chen Mo's heart because, no matter how Ye Zhaozhao explained herself, her instinctive reaction was the same as it had been when she had chased away other girls in the past. He was no longer a boy. In the end, he only said, "Now that Meng Yinlong has returned, can you retire from your role as his temporary older sister?" Ye Zhaozhao's eyes darkened. Chen Mo, I've explained it many times. I only see him as a younger brother. You've never been this unreasonable before. Her expression turned cold, and she left the bedroom and went to her study. Chen Mo remained where he was, his heart aching. After this day, the two of them seemed to have fallen into a strange, subtle atmosphere. They hadn't exactly fought, but they were no longer as close as they had been before. Until the Su family called for them to return home to have dinner. At the dinner table, Father and Mother Su brought up the same old questions. When are you planning on getting married? When will I be able to hold a grandchild? Ye Zhaozhao hadn't told her family that she was a non-marriage person yet. And Mother Su had never really approved of Chen Mo, an orphan who had lost both of his parents. If their daughter hadn't been determined to be with him back then, she wouldn't have accepted Chen Mo. Now that they had been together for 8 years and weren't married, Mother Su's opinion of him was even worse. Chen Mo, is it because of the dance troupe that you don't want to get married? I've been telling you to quit and get married to Zhaozhao and start preparing for a baby. Mother Su looked at him disapprovingly. Chen Mo lowered his head and remained silent. Ye Zhaozhao finally spoke. It's my decision. The company is busy, and I'm not in a hurry to get married. Father Su said with a cold expression, You're already 30? Aren't you in a hurry? I've been telling you to choose someone from a family of equal standing. No matter how busy the company is, they could still be of assistance to you. What good is just good looks? Mother Su said in a sarcastic tone. Mom, stop talking, Ye Zhaozhao said coldly. Only then did Mother Su shut up, unwillingly. After dinner, Ye Zhaozhao went to the study with Father Su to talk about work. Mother Su naturally didn't want to spend time with Chen Mo, so she went straight to her room. Chen Mo felt uncomfortable, so he simply went outside to wait in the car. Ye Zhaozhao's assistant was driving today. The assistant looked at Chen Mo's tired expression in the rearview mirror and, to break the awkwardness, said, Mr. Chen, you'll be at the company's dance next week, right? Chen Mo opened his eyes. What dance? As she spoke, the assistant pulled up a photo on her phone and showed it to him. Look, the company is having its 60th anniversary dance this year. President Su asked me to get a suit customized. He must be planning to give you a surprise. After all, Chen Mo was a professional dancer and also her boyfriend, so he would naturally be invited to be her dance partner. Chapter 3. Although their atmosphere had been a little cold recently, and they were obviously in the midst of a Cold War. In the past, whenever they had had a Cold War, Ye Zhaozhao would use surprises like this to break the ice. Chen Mo glanced at the photo and forced a smile. Maybe. Soon after, Ye Zhaozhao also got into the back seat. Knowing that Chen Mo had been wrong today, she took his hand and said, Don't take what Mom said seriously. The warmth of her palm spread to his hand. Chen Mo no longer wanted to continue this Cold War and naturally leaned onto her shoulder. Then, how are we going to explain the marriage issue in the future? He took the initiative to show weakness, and Ye Zhaozhao couldn't help but kiss his cheek. I'll handle it. Don't worry. Ever since hearing the assistant mention the company dance, Chen Mo had planned his time in advance and had even canceled a competition because of it. But until the day of the dance, Ye Zhaozhao had still not mentioned it to him. Watching the woman change into her evening dress and go out, Chen Mo didn't say anything and put on his coat and followed her out. The moment he arrived at the ballroom, he froze completely. Ye Zhaozhao, as the president, had to perform the opening dance, and in the center of the ballroom, wearing a blue suit, was Mingxin. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, he was dancing gracefully with her. The blue suit was the same suit that the assistant had shown him. So, it wasn't for him, but for Meng Shan. She hadn't wanted him as her dance partner, but Meng Shan. As the music ended, all the lights were focused on them. There was enthusiastic applause. No one had noticed Chen Mo at the entrance, and he was staring at Ye Zhaozhao, watching her dark eyes, staring intensely at Meng Shan. There seemed to be emotions surging in her eyes. Meng Shan's ears were slightly red. He suddenly said, "Sister Zhaozhao, can I kiss you on the cheek, as a farewell kiss?" Ye Zhaozhao remained silent, seeming to tacitly agree. Meng Shan then gathered his courage and lowered his head. Just as his kiss was about to land, Ye Zhaozhao's gaze suddenly swept over Chen Mo, who was standing below the stage. Her body froze and she instinctively pushed Meng Shan away. Chen Mo quietly stared at her for a few seconds, then turned around and left. As soon as he left the hotel, his wrist was grabbed tightly. Ye Zhaozhao, slightly out of breath, had chased after him to stop him. Chen Mo looked at her coldly. "Let go." He had always been this way. When he had been wronged, he never cried or made a scene. Instead, he used indifference to disguise his pain. Because his parents had passed away, he had no one to support him. So he couldn't show any weakness. Even if he lost teeth, he would swallow the blood and would show everyone who wanted to see him make a fool of himself that he didn't hurt. In the past, Ye Zhaozhao would see his personality and feel heartbroken. But now that he was actually looking at her with that cold gaze, he felt panicked. "Listen to my explanation. It's not what you saw. Meng Shan's internship is about to end. I said that if he got an excellent result on his internship, I'd agree to one of his requests. He asked to be my dance partner. Besides, you've been so busy lately, working till so late. I didn't want you to be too tired, so I didn't ask you to be my dance partner. And as for his request just now, I was thinking about how I should educate him, and was out of it for a moment." Soon, Meng Shan also followed them out. He cried as he looked at Chen Mo. "Brother Chen Mo, I'm sorry. I grew up abroad. A cheek kiss is normal. I only wanted to say goodbye properly to Sister Zhaozhao. I really didn't mean anything else. Please don't be angry." He looked like a pitiful victim. It sounded less like an apology and more like he had been bullied. Chen Mo suddenly felt exhausted. From beginning to end, Meng Shan had been sniffling, acting like he had been wronged. Chen Mo didn't want to make things difficult for a young boy. Whether he believed it or not, he could only try to convince himself to believe Ye Zhaozhao's explanation. Ye Zhaozhao had comforted Chen Mo. This time, she didn't reach out to wipe Meng Shan's tears, but remained silent, keeping her distance from Meng Shan. Soon, Meng Yanlong arrived. Meng Yanlong didn't ask anything. She just glanced at Chen Mo and forcefully led Meng Shan away. Perhaps because of this incident, and in order to avoid any suspicion, Meng Shan left the company and went back to school before the formal internship period had ended. On the same night that he left, Ye Zhaozhao didn't get home until very late. She looked at Chen Mo. Meng Shan left early. Her tone was calm. But Chen Mo suddenly had the feeling that Ye Zhaozhao was blaming him for making a big deal out of the situation and chasing Meng Shan away. After this day, the relationship between the two of them seemed to have reached an impasse again. Nothing had changed, yet it was as if everything had changed. Her mood at home was growing more and more indifferent every day. Sometimes, they would lie on the same bed, but they had nothing to say to each other. She no longer held him as she went to sleep like before. They would lie with their backs to each other, as if they were dreaming different dreams. Until one day, Ye Zhaozhao suddenly came home very late. But Chen Mo could sense that her mood seemed to have improved. She wasn't always so cold anymore and had gradually started to smile again. In the morning, Ye Zhaozhao got out of bed and went to the bathroom to wash up. Chen Mo heard her phone on the table start to vibrate. Assuming it was something work-related, he was just about to take it to the bathroom when he suddenly froze, seeing the screen. It was a message from Meng Shan. "Sister Zhaozhao, thank you for accompanying me to the school mixer last week. You said you'd treat me to dinner today. Hurry up and come out. How about we go to the amusement park today?" Chen Mo's body went cold. He silently opened the chat log between the two of them. So, the day that she had come home so late last week was because she had accompanied Meng Shan to a mixer. So, her mood had improved all because of Meng Shan? He put the phone down and turned to look at the bathroom. The faint sound of water was coming from within. His heart felt empty. When Ye Zhaozhao returned to the bedroom, she saw Chen Mo sitting on the edge of the bed. "What's wrong?" Chen Mo asked calmly. "Do you have time? It's been a long time since we've had a meal together. If you have time, let's go on a date today?" Perhaps Ye Zhaozhao had realized that she had been too indifferent towards him lately. She rubbed her brow and didn't refuse. "Okay, I'll pick a restaurant." Chapter 4. Ye Zhaozhao's car pulled up in front of a couple's restaurant. Just as the two of them got out of the car and were about to enter the restaurant, Chen Mo suddenly handed her the phone he had been holding in his pocket. "Your phone? I brought it out for you." Ye Zhaozhao hummed in acknowledgement and glanced at it subconsciously. A few seconds later, the air suddenly grew silent. Chen Mo's heart sank inch by inch. "What's wrong?" Ye Zhaozhao put away her phone, her face remaining calm. "Something suddenly came up at the company. I probably won't be able to have lunch with you. You go eat on your own this time, and I'll join you next time. Okay?" His heart sank to the bottom. Chen Mo tugged at the corner of his lips. "Is it that important? Can it wait?" "Yes, it's very important." As if feeling guilty, Ye Zhaozhao kissed him on the cheek. "Chen Mo, I'll definitely be with you next time." With that, she turned and left. Chen Mo watched her back as she disappeared. He watched his heart completely fall. Deeply, deepest, and he could no longer find it. As expected, that afternoon, he saw a post by Meng Shun on social media. His 9-grid photo showed food and photos from an amusement park. In one of them, a woman's hand was in the shot. Meng Shun hadn't cropped it out. No one was more familiar with that hand than he was. That hand had caressed his face countless times, had held him tightly countless times, and had intertwined with his countless times. That hand was constantly reminding him. His girlfriend of 8 years had rejected his date and had gone to an amusement park with another boy. The room was silent. Chen Mo closed his eyes. Perhaps, this time, they should have a serious talk. But until nightfall, Chen Mo hadn't heard from Ye Zhaozhao. Instead, he received a call from one of her friends. "Chen Mo, Ye Zhaozhao is at the racetrack and is about to do a life-or-death race. You should come and talk her out of it." The voice on the other end was extremely anxious. Chen Mo frowned and left with a cold expression. Ye Zhaozhao had driven race cars before, but since they got together, she had promised him that she would value her life and not drive them anymore. He rushed to the racetrack as fast as he could, but he discovered that it was too late. Ye Zhaozhao was already on the track. A group of people were gathered in the spectator stands, and Meng Shun was standing to the side with tears in his eyes. He grabbed someone at random. "What happened? Why is she suddenly racing?" Ye Zhaozhao's friend glanced at Meng Shun, looking hesitant. Meng Shun choked back a sob. "It's my fault. I insisted on coming to the racetrack. Sister Zhaozhao brought me here, and a woman asked me out tonight. Sister Zhaozhao didn't agree, so the two of them started racing." Chen Mo understood completely. So, it was to prevent Meng Shun from being asked out by other women. So, even if she had promised him that she wouldn't touch a race car ever again, she had thrown it all to the back of her mind. He looked at the familiar car on the track, listening to the familiar engine sound, and it felt like he was back 8 years ago. That year, it was here that he had completely opened his heart to her and had accepted her confession. That year, she had brought him to the racetrack and had cockily raised her chin at him. "Chen Mo, if I can win the next race by more than 2 laps, you'll be my boyfriend." Chen Mo knew that this was impossible, so he agreed. As a result, Ye Zhaozhao drove recklessly, as if she had no regard for her life. In the end, because she sped up too much, she won. But she also crashed and was seriously injured. That time, Ye Zhaozhao almost lost her life. Back then, Ye Zhaozhao, covered in injuries, was lying in a hospital bed, but she held onto his hand tightly. "I won. You're my boyfriend now." For him, she was willing to give up her life. He couldn't explain what he felt, but a thought vaguely appeared in Chen Mo's mind. Maybe it would be her for the rest of his life. His emotions were cold, so he needed to receive an intense love to dare give his own heart. And Ye Zhaozhao was exactly that person who was willing to give up her life to be with him. At that time, How could Chen Mo have ever imagined that one day Ye Zhaozhao would also be willing to give up her life for someone else? Ye Zhaozhao, are you trying to kill yourself? You're speeding up. Her friend's shout pulled Chen Mo back from his daze. He had just raised his eyes when he saw Ye Zhaozhao's race car rush past the finish line without slowing down and then crash straight into the iron wall of the fence. Bang! Her car flipped several meters. Mengshan screamed in fear. In that moment, Chen Mo actually felt as if he was seeing Ye Zhaozhao from 8 years ago when she had had her accident. At the hospital, Ye Zhaozhao was unconscious when she was brought in. Her left leg was seriously injured, and half of Chen Mo's body was stained with her blood. Chen Mo just watched as she was pushed into the emergency room. 2 hours later, Ye Zhaozhao was finally out of danger and was pushed into a patient room. He stayed by Ye Zhaozhao's side for the entire night. He didn't know when she would wake up. The next day, when Ye Zhaozhao's friend came, he couldn't bear to see Chen Mo's haggard appearance and his blood-stained clothes. He had always been a man with a cool demeanor. When had he ever looked so disheveled? Chen Mo, go get some rest and take a shower. The bloodstains on Chen Mo's body had already dried. He nodded and stood up to leave the room. Chen Mo didn't rest. He just borrowed a set of clean clothes from a nurse, showered, and prepared to return to the patient room. But as soon as he got to the door, he heard the agitated voice of Ye Zhaozhao's friend. What were you doing yesterday? You were willing to risk your life for Mengshan? Ye Zhaozhao, don't play dumb with me. What are your feelings towards Mengshan? Chen Mo gripped the doorknob tightly, but no answer came from inside the room. Then, her friend asked, weren't you in love with Chen Mo to death? What is this now? This time, an answer came from inside. Ye Zhaozhao's voice was still weak, with a slight hoarseness, but every word pierced Chen Mo's heart. She said, it's been 8 years. I'm bored. Chen Mo froze in place, and it felt like all the blood in his body had frozen. He didn't hear a single word of what was said in the room after that. The 5 words had left him feeling dizzy. Perhaps he should have kicked the door open and demanded an explanation from Ye Zhaozhao. Perhaps he should have rushed in crying and made a mess of the entire room. But that was what the 20-year-old Chen Mo would have done, not the 28-year-old Chen Mo. Perhaps this was the reason Ye Zhaozhao was bored. Even though his entire heart had been hurt so badly that it was full of holes, even though he felt like he was about to collapse at any moment, he still did his best to maintain his composure. He turned around and left the patient room. He walked out of the hospital alone and returned home. He had found so many reasons for her, understanding her indifference to be the quiet intimacy that came after the passion had subsided, regarding her special treatment of Meng Shan to be that of an older sister. But only today did she finally tear away all the illusions. For Ye Zhaozhao, who craved passion, her love would never return to normalcy. It would only be transferred. If she didn't give it to him, then she would give it to someone who was more new and exciting. So, the growing indifference was only because she was bored. Not wanting to get married was also because she was bored. Falling in love with someone else was also because she was bored. She had relentlessly chased him and had gotten him in the first place. And then after 8 years, she was bored of him. She was the one who had said she loved him first, and she was the one who had said she didn't love him anymore. Chen Mo, you've been played for 8 years. How ridiculous. When he got home, he didn't do anything. Instead, he started to pack his luggage. He had lived in this place for 8 years, and his belongings were so numerous that they couldn't fit into several suitcases. So, Chen Mo didn't take anything. He sealed all of his belongings into several large boxes and threw them all out, as if he were throwing away those ridiculous 8 years. His entire heart was aching badly, but even if his bones were about to break, he wouldn't try to cover up the truth any longer. Finally, looking at the house and seeing that there wasn't a single trace of him left, he took out his phone and edited a text message to Ye Zhaozhao, left the key, and closed the door completely. It was still raining outside, and the sky was misty. He didn't bring an umbrella. He didn't call for a car. And he didn't have a destination. Until a car stopped in front of him. Chapter 5. Chen Mo never imagined that on the first day after breaking up with Ye Zhaozhao, he would find himself at Ming Yanlong's apartment. But he discovered that he didn't have the extra energy to think about it. Meng Yanlong saw that his face was unusually red and immediately touched his forehead. It was burning hot. You have a fever? She looked at Chen Mo with a cold expression. He was the one who was sick, but it seemed as if she was the one who was unhappy. Chen Mo looked at her calmly and answered a question with another question. Meng Yanlong, you don't need to worry about me anymore. Ye Zhaozhao and I, we broke up. Meng Yanlong was taken aback. Before she could say anything, Chen Mo had already fainted. She reached out instinctively, pulled him into her arms, and held him tightly. After a long while, a helpless sigh came from the air. Chen Mo had been caught in 2 rainstorms and had already started having a fever. In his semi-conscious state, he faintly felt that someone was taking care of him. Someone was feeding him medicine, wiping his sweat with a warm towel, and there was a warm embrace that had seemed to be holding him the entire time. When his fever finally subsided and he was slowly regaining consciousness, he was awakened by a suffocating force on his body. Chen Mo slowly opened his eyes. He could smell the pleasant scent of Meng Yanlong. Then, a gentle touch as light as a feather came to his lips. His eyes widened. He finally realized what was happening. Meng Yanlong was kissing him? The next second, Meng Yanlong raised her eyes and locked eyes with Chen Mo's shocked, almond-shaped eyes. As expected of a cold beauty, even after being caught in the middle of a stolen kiss, she remained unfazed. She didn't even let go of his hand. Chen Mo's fever had just broken, and his mind was still a little unclear. Why did you kiss me? Meng Yanlong looked at him, pausing for a moment. Because I like you. Chen Mo's mind went blank, and he completely crashed. And Meng Yanlong boldly confessed. Her black and white pupils stared at him intently, with a possessive air. Chen Mo, I liked you 8 years ago, even before Ye Zhaozhao did. It was just that before I had the chance to act, you were already tangled up with her. Now that you've broken up, I'm not going to give up anymore. She had liked him 8 years ago? Even before Ye Zhaozhao? Meng Yanlong slowly moved closer to him. That cold face that was usually free from the world became larger in his vision, full of human emotions and desires. She spoke as if she were enticing him. I want to continue the kiss from earlier. Chen Mo, if you need it, I can take responsibility. Chen Mo looked her in the eyes. How do you plan on taking responsibility? I can marry you. She answered simply and directly. But her expression was serious, and it was clearly not a joke. He stared at her quietly. He had dated for 8 years and had proposed 3 times. In the end, he had only received the words, I'm bored. But Meng Yanlong had agreed to give him what he had wanted so easily. This world was truly too dramatic. Meng Yanlong continued to look at him with her deep gaze, forcing him to be unable to turn away and to be unable to calm down and think. And only by being with me will Ye Zhaozhao stop harassing you. She really knew how to play with people's minds. Sure enough, in the end, Chen Mo closed his eyes and directly grabbed her neck, kissing her on the lips. Then you take responsibility. The next day, Ye Zhaozhao woke up in the hospital room and discovered that the room was empty. Chen Mo still hadn't come. She had heard from someone that he had gone back to change his clothes, but an entire night had passed. Why hadn't he returned yet? For some reason, she was a bit annoyed that Chen Mo wasn't there to be by her side when she was hurt. She was just about to unlock her phone to call him when she saw a text message that Chen Mo had sent her yesterday. The one who was hot first has already cooled down. The one who was slow to heat up is still boiling. How could I have ever believed that someone like you would have true feelings? Ye Zhaozhao, let's break up. The few short lines were like a thunderbolt that had struck Ye Zhaozhao. She was even a little out of it. Chen Mo had asked to break up? Her mind buzzed, and she discovered that she was unable to bear it. The 2 words, break up, were like a sharp blade that had pierced her heart and instantly dug a hole in her chest. She frantically called Chen Mo, but the call wouldn't go through. Ye Zhaozhao called him again and again, but the call was hung up again and again. Her chest was pounding, and a fear of losing Chen Mo took over her entire body. Not even caring about the injury on her body, Ye Zhaozhao pulled out her 4-line and tried to run out. Just then, Several of her friends and Meng Shan opened the door and saw that Ye Zhaozhao had actually gotten out of bed. Ye Zhaozhao, are you crazy? Ye Zhaozhao didn't care about them and roared angrily, "Get out of my way!" Then, ignoring the pain of her wound, she went home. But when she got home, she discovered that everything that was related to Chen Mo had disappeared. Her eyes trembled. That uneasiness was about to consume her. Could what he said be true? Did he really want to break up? Ye Zhaozhao became increasingly panicked, and she took out her phone again to call Chen Mo. This time, he picked up. Her heart immediately relaxed, and she said urgently, "Chen Mo, I." Before she could finish her sentence, she heard a female voice, deliberately lowered, from the other end. "He was too tired last night, and he's still sleeping. Don't wake him." Ye Zhaozhao's heart exploded. Meng Yanlong? How could Chen Mo be with Meng Yanlong? Ye Zhaozhao's eyes turned red, as if she was about to murder someone. Her hand was gripping her phone so hard that she was about to break it. "Where is he?" Meng Yanlong said unhurriedly, "At my place in my bed." After hearing this, Ye Zhaozhao's face turned green. She glared angrily. She spoke through clenched teeth, "Meng Yanlong, do you know what you're saying?" Meng Yanlong looked down at Chen Mo, who was still sleeping, and tiptoed out of the room. She just stood there, not saying anything, but she exuded a coolness that was even colder than the autumn moonlight. "I know, and I'm going to marry him." Hearing this, it was as if a war had just broken out. Ye Zhaozhao's veins popped out, and she slammed her fist against the wall. Ye Zhaozhao's eyes were bloodshot, and it was as if she was about to cry blood. It was pure hatred that caused Meng Shan, who had followed her, and her friends to feel a tightness in their chests. What was going on? This was the first time that they had seen Ye Zhaozhao like this in a long time. So long that they had almost forgotten who Ye Zhaozhao would look like that for. Her friend asked carefully, "Ye Zhaozhao, did something happen to Chen Mo?" When Ye Zhaozhao heard this, she slowly raised her eyes to look at him. It scared him so much that he immediately took a step back. Only Meng Shan dared to rush in when he saw that she was like that. He pouted, and it was as if he was certain of his guess. Meng Shan carefully tugged at Ye Zhaozhao's sleeve. "Sister Zhaozhao, is it because you and Chen Mo are fighting because of me? Don't fight. It's all my fault." She looked monstrous and spat out one word with difficulty, "Get out." Meng Shan was also scared by Ye Zhaozhao's expression and tone, and his entire body trembled, but he pretended not to notice. Ye Zhaozhao only cared about asking Meng Yanlong on the phone, "I'm warning you, Chen Mo loved me 8 years ago, and he will only love me 8 years later. No matter if you're a helping hand in need, or if you're being caring, Chen Mo will not marry you." Meng Yanlong let out a cold laugh, not paying attention to what Ye Zhaozhao had said at all. "Okay, then we'll see you at the wedding?" Then, she hung up the call. Ye Zhaozhao's expression changed drastically, and like a madwoman, she repeatedly called Chen Mo's number. Unfortunately, the call was no longer going through. Ye Zhaozhao's friends looked at all of this, and only thought that she deserved it. Ever since hearing Ye Zhaozhao say that she was bored in the hospital, he had had an idea of what Ye Zhaozhao would go through in the future. How could someone whose heart had already changed get the same true devotion? Moreover, Chen Mo had already done more than enough. In the end, Ye Zhaozhao's friend had her assistant send Ye Zhaozhao back to the hospital, and he turned and left. Before he left, he didn't forget to glare at Meng Shan. In his life, the thing he hated the most was a third party who interfered with other people's relationships. After Ye Zhaozhao's friends left, Meng Shan still wanted to get closer to Ye Zhaozhao, but Ye Zhaozhao pushed him away. Seeing that she was about to leave, Meng Shan could only force himself to follow, and then ask her, "Sister Zhaozhao, your wounds haven't healed yet. Where are you going?" She frowned and asked unhappily, "Didn't I tell you to get out?" That questioning tone made Meng Shan feel as if he was the one in charge. After thinking about what to do, he suddenly started crying in a fake way, saying, "I was only worried about Sister Zhaozhao's body. If Sister Zhaozhao is annoyed with me, I'll leave." But at this moment, Chen Mo was the only thing on Ye Zhaozhao's mind. She was thinking, Chen Mo had always loved her so much, just like he had 8 years ago. Why was it that overnight, he not only wanted to break up with her, but was also tangled up with Meng Yanlong? At that moment, Ye Zhaozhao suddenly stopped. Ming Shun, who was pretending to cry, thought that Ye Zhaozhao was finally starting to calm down from her madness and was waiting for Ye Zhaozhao to comfort him. But Ye Zhaozhao suddenly turned around and grabbed Ming Shun's wrist tightly. It was as if she was going to crush his wrist. "Did you say something to Chen Mo?" Ye Zhaozhao's gaze toward Ming Shun was terrifying, and her voice was cold. It was as if she was sure that he was the culprit behind all of this. Ming Shun was so scared that he shrunk his neck and stood there looking wronged. Because of the pain in his wrist, he put on a pitiful appearance and sobbed quietly. "Sister Zhaozhao, how could I say anything to Brother Chen Mo? And at that time, Brother Chen Mo was guarding you at the hospital. I was outside handling the hospital paperwork. I didn't have time to see him at all. If Sister Zhaozhao doesn't believe me, you can check the hospital security footage." Ye Zhaozhao looked at Ming Shun's righteous appearance and suddenly became unsure. Then, Ming Shun saw that Ye Zhaozhao had softened for a moment and started to make a painful expression, saying, "Sister Zhaozhao, you're hurting me." Only then did Ye Zhaozhao anxiously let go. She suddenly thought about how she hadn't seen Chen Mo at the hospital. Could it be that he had just left when she had woken up? And then, Ye Zhaozhao's heart suddenly tightened, and she remembered the words she had said to her friend in the hospital. "I'm bored." So, Chen Mo had just happened to hear her say those words? So, that's why he had asked to break up with her? She looked at Ming Shun, who was standing next to her, and he was becoming increasingly unpleasant to her. Ming Shun's appearance had indeed added some fun into her monotonous life for the past 8 years. Ye Zhaozhao had also found the same passion and excitement with Ming Shun that she had felt when she had first liked Chen Mo. But when all of this had happened, Ye Zhaozhao had never thought about what would happen if Chen Mo was no longer by her side. She had gotten used to having Chen Mo by her side. It was said that mistresses were good at seeing through the minds of women. At that moment, Ming Shun grasped onto the moment when Ye Zhaozhao's heart was weak. "Although I don't know what happened between you and Brother Chen Mo, I think that Brother Chen Mo might have just misunderstood us. He's actually very good. I know that Sister Zhaozhao can calm down, then go to the hospital to treat her wound, and then it won't be too late to explain it to Brother Chen Mo." He held Ye Zhaozhao in his arms, his eyes turning red, as if he had been greatly wronged. Ye Zhaozhao also started to slowly numb herself, believing what Ming Shun had said. After all, Chen Mo had loved her for 8 years. Even if he had heard her say those words, he should have come to her for an explanation and not get tangled up with someone else. Yes, that must be it. Ming Shun saw that Ye Zhaozhao had already believed what he had said and continued to cry about how worried he was for her body. Seeing this, Ye Zhaozhao didn't have as much hostility towards Ming Shun as she had had before. She even started to apologize to him. Ming Shun put on a considerate face, saying, "It's okay, Sister Zhaozhao. I know you're just too anxious. I don't blame you." But in his eyes, he couldn't hide his smugness. Chapter 6. When Chen Mo woke up at Ming Yinlong's home, he saw that Ming Yinlong had stayed by his bedside the entire time without leaving. Chen Mo was surprised by this. "Why aren't you doing what you need to do?" When Ming Yinlong saw that Chen Mo had woken up, she didn't answer his pointless question. Instead, she cut straight to the point. "Ye Zhaozhao called while you were sleeping." A hint of pain flashed in Chen Mo's eyes, but he still spoke stubbornly. "I'm completely done with her. Don't mention her name in front of me again." Ming Yinlong stood up and took Chen Mo's phone from the table. When she looked down at him, her icy eyes seemed to ripple, and a barely noticeable smile appeared on the corner of her lips. She practically watched as Chen Mo blacklisted all of Ye Zhaozhao's contact information. After all, if you were going to cut it off, you should cut it off completely. After everything was taken care of, Chen Mo finally looked at Ming Yinlong. He was extremely curious. When and why had Ming Yinlong loved him for 8 years, without doing anything? It was ridiculous that he had been with Ye Zhaozhao for 8 years, and she had fallen in love with someone else. But this person who had never appeared in Chen Mo's life was loyal to him. He suddenly discovered that Ming Yinlong was even more foolish than he was, the one whose true love had been betrayed. Chen Mo couldn't help but ask, "Ming Yinlong, do you really like me? Or were those words just something you said to comfort me because you didn't want me to be too sad?" He wanted a stable relationship. If a relationship didn't have a clear goal for too long, it would make Chen Mo feel very insecure. Chen Mo wanted to be certain that Meng Yanlong's appearance during his most difficult time was because she truly liked him. I like you. It's real. Meng Yanlong repeated it once again with a serious and unwavering attitude. In reality, a verbal promise wasn't able to represent anything. It was just like with Ye Zhaozhao. In the end, all that was left was lies. And none of those promises had come true. But before, Chen Mo had agreed to Meng Yanlong's words on impulse. At that time, his mind had been filled with Ye Zhaozhao. He hadn't thought about what he would do if Meng Yanlong didn't love him anymore after they got married. Chen Mo couldn't bear to be abandoned by someone again. Even though there were tears in his eyes, he kept himself from crying, because he felt that crying over a slag of a woman was a waste of tears. Meng Yanlong, will you change your heart, like Ye Zhaozhao did? Chen Mo looked straight into Meng Yanlong's deep, pool-like eyes without flinching. It was as if there was a constant drizzle that blocked out the sunlight. It was a blur, but when they looked at each other, the dark clouds would dissipate and clear, gentle light would shine down. It's been 8 years. My love for you can withstand the test of time. Yes, she had been silently holding on for 8 years in the background, where no one could see her. During the years of her youth, she had given up on the better men that she was supposed to have met. And the one who shouldn't have changed her heart had now fallen in love with someone who was just in their early 20s. With all of that, what reason did Chen Mo have to reject Meng Yanlong? What reason did he have to tell Chen Mo that Meng Yanlong wasn't worth trying to accept? To love? Perhaps he could choose to gamble one more time. He was too familiar with the feeling of loss. It truly hurt, hurting so much that even after the wound had healed, it would still flare up again and again during the quiet night. It was tormenting, suffocating. The endless darkness would come at him like a hurricane. That feeling was like a flower wilting, like grass being uprooted. It was excruciating. But those who were alive had to keep living, no matter how painful it was. They also had to regain hope. And now, Meng Yanlong was the only hope that Chen Mo had grasped onto. So, Chen Mo also hoped that Meng Yanlong wouldn't betray his last true feelings. He reached his hand out to Meng Yanlong and made up a random lie. Yanlong, my legs are numb. Can you help me up? Meng Yanlong knew that Chen Mo was just trying to accept her. She lowered her head without saying anything, but a small smile curled up on the corners of her lips. She helped Chen Mo to the sofa and gently kissed him on the cheek. Then, Chen Mo heard her say, unhurriedly, do you want to go out and relax? Chen Mo had originally planned to play on his phone on the sofa for the entire afternoon, but he had never imagined that Meng Yanlong would suddenly say something like that. He thought for a moment and looked at the weather outside. Meng Yanlong didn't even know how, but she brought out a bottle of sunscreen and some sun hats and silently placed them in front of Chen Mo. He looked at the cold beauty in surprise. When had she become so good at taking care of others? However, it seemed as if Chen Mo had never truly understood Meng Yanlong. He had always thought that Meng Yanlong was someone who was centered around herself and that she treated everyone with a cold and indifferent attitude, just from looking at her cold appearance. Now, it seemed as if she was different from what he had thought. Since Meng Yanlong had already taken out those things, Chen Mo didn't have a reason to not go out. Moreover, he did have a lot of worries in his heart. Finding a place with very few people to relax would help to relieve his bad mood. Okay. Chen Mo put some sunscreen all over his body in the living room and put on one of the hats. Meng Yanlong waited for Chen Mo to finish getting ready. When she saw Chen Mo instinctively head toward the back seat, Meng Yanlong immediately stopped him. She was extremely serious when she said, Chen Mo, I'm not your driver. Chen Mo's feet seemed to be nailed to the floor. He looked at Meng Yanlong with a slightly blank expression. He had never heard anyone call him Chen Mo before. It seemed that other than Ye Zhaozhao, the only other person who had called him by that name was Meng Yanlong. Why did that name sound strange when Meng Yanlong said it? Then, he remembered the words Meng Yanlong had said, why can't I sit in the back? Meng Yanlong pulled Chen Mo straight to the front. She forcefully pushed him in when he didn't want to sit in the passenger seat. Because the passenger seat is where the boyfriend sits. We're not married yet. So let's just pretend that you're my boyfriend. Helplessly, Chen Mo buckled his seatbelt. Meng Yanlong sat down to drive, and Chen Mo asked curiously, "Where are you planning to go to relax?" She answered mysteriously, "You'll know when we get there." Chapter 7. It took about half an hour, and Meng Yanlong's mysterious relaxation spot was finally revealed. It was just a small hillside. However, the place was sparsely populated, and the air was fresh. It was indeed quite suitable for calming the mind and taking a walk. Chen Mo sat on the hillside, and he could almost see the entire city. If only he hadn't fallen in love so easily. He clearly knew that Ye Zhaozhao was a player. A leopard can't change its spots. When she rejected his marriage proposals again and again, Chen Mo should have seen through it earlier and cut his losses in time. If someone truly and sincerely loved only one person, they would definitely want to get married, because it was only through marriage that they could build the most basic sense of security for themselves and for the person they loved. If they couldn't even do something so simple, then their heart must still be harboring other thoughts. Chen Mo just sat there, and he had no intention of speaking. At that moment, Meng Yanlong even regretted it a little. If only she had confessed earlier and had returned to the country sooner to snatch Chen Mo back. Wouldn't she have had to wait until Chen Mo was betrayed by Ye Zhaozhao to appear? It was only because Ye Zhaozhao was her close friend that she had been avoiding them when they were dating. But now, Chen Mo and Ye Zhaozhao had broken up, and Ye Zhaozhao was still mixed up with her younger brother. This was telling Meng Yanlong that it was her right to snatch Chen Mo back. "Chen Mo, you regret it, don't you?" Chen Mo had said before that Meng Yanlong wasn't allowed to mention anything about Ye Zhaozhao in front of him. Hearing that Meng Yanlong was still asking about his relationship with her, he couldn't help but be a little angry. "Meng Yanlong, did you take my words as just a breeze in your ears?" This had truly offended Chen Mo, but Meng Yanlong's plan was for Chen Mo to sort things out for himself and completely let go of that failed relationship. That was the only way he wouldn't bring his past relationship into this new one. For example, right now, Meng Yanlong always felt that Chen Mo was only using her to get revenge on Ye Zhaozhao, even if Chen Mo didn't have that thought in mind. But Meng Yanlong wasn't discouraged by Chen Mo's words, and she didn't have much of a reaction on her face. "Chen Mo, I just don't want you to avoid it. No matter if it's revenge on Ye Zhaozhao or revenge on Meng Shun, we're all going to see each other sooner or later. We'll run into each other sooner or later. We have to be clear about it sooner or later. It's better to just deal with it directly." Chen Mo was silent, and he also realized that his tone just now was wrong. So he apologized to Meng Yanlong. Then, he just sat there, and he didn't have any intentions of saying anything. He didn't respond to any of Meng Yanlong's suggestions. Meng Yanlong seemed to have been expecting this result. She just looked up at him, without saying anything. Then, she shifted her gaze away from Chen Mo and sighed in a helpless manner. It was silence, but it was also indulgence. After all, it was a knot in his heart, and she, for Chen Mo, was still an outsider. It was indeed not wise to rush things. So Meng Yanlong sat quietly to the side and glanced down at the weeds on the ground. Then, she casually pulled out a few weeds in her hand and started weaving something. Chen Mo saw that Meng Yanlong wasn't saying anything, so he just looked into the distance. It was only after he got tired of sitting that he intended to stand up and take a walk. Just as Chen Mo was about to turn his head to call for Meng Yanlong, he saw a heart made of light in front of his eyes. It looked like a small heart that was folded out of grass leaves. The thickness of the leaf was quite thin. As long as he held it up to the sun, he would be able to see another smaller heart inside the heart. Meng Yanlong looked at the other heart that was contained within the first heart. Her tone was a bit serious. "If you still don't want to open your heart right now, then hide your heart inside of mine. I've already been keeping my heart in there for a long time." Chen Mo looked at Meng Yanlong, not understanding what she was trying to say. His expression slowly grew complicated. Meng Yanlong's feelings for Chen Mo were too intense, just like Ye Zhaozhao's had been 8 years ago. The only difference was that Meng Yanlong was holding on to a love that she had had for 8 years. What was Ye Zhaozhao's mindset at the time? She was probably just planning on playing around, right? Chen Mo took the heart in his hand and then got up to leave. Meng Yanlong looked at the heart as it disappeared from her hand. For a moment, she felt a blankness, but a hint of tenderness appeared in her eyes. Then, she quickly chased after him and asked, "Chen Mo, where are you going?" Chen Mo answered without turning his head, "I'm going for a walk." After hearing this, Meng Yanlong followed him. There were quite a few types of flowers along the way. Because it had rained a little that morning, there were still some droplets of dew on the leaves. Instead of relaxing, his mind was just becoming more confused by Meng Yanlong's attacks. In fact, from the moment he had stayed the night at Meng Yanlong's house, Chen Mo had already made his decision. This time, it was impossible for him to get back together with Ye Zhaozhao. 8 years of feelings. While it was indeed a bit of a pity, after all, how many 8 years would someone have in their life? It was just a pity that the only 8 years he had was wasted on Ye Zhaozhao. Anyone who had reached this age would want a stable life. But Ye Zhaozhao was still chasing excitement and searching for newness. He should have seen through it earlier. He should have seen that Ye Zhaozhao was a woman that he shouldn't have trusted his whole life to. In the end, he was still the one who had to propose to her again and again. But for Ye Zhaozhao, a marriage proposal was a burden. Every time, she would find an excuse, and no matter what the reason was, Chen Mo had actually accepted it. All kinds of reasons. Saying that they weren't mature enough, and they had to wait longer. Saying that the company was busy lately, and they should wait until things calmed down. But half a year ago, she had said the most outrageous thing. "Chen Mo, I'm a non-marriage person. I really love you, but I don't want to get married." After they got together, Ye Zhaozhao had never mentioned that she was a non-marriage person. If she was, then why hadn't she mentioned it before? At that time, it was as if Chen Mo had understood that Ye Zhaozhao just didn't want to get married to him, and that she had already fallen in love with someone else. She had liked the wild grass outside. He never imagined that that wild grass would actually be Meng Yanlong's younger brother. Under the guise of taking care of her younger brother, she was cozying up to Meng Shan, and she even told her friends that she was already bored of him. Chen Mo didn't understand. If she didn't love him anymore, and she wanted to go find someone else, why hadn't she just told him earlier? Why did she have to drag it out and let him discover it himself? She was probably waiting for him to be the one to say that they should break up, right? After all, Meng Yanlong was right. They were all going to run into each other sooner or later. No matter how they tried to avoid it, they could avoid it for only a while, not forever. No matter what they did, it would be better to just face the reality. Chen Mo stopped suddenly in front of Meng Yanlong, who was still holding the heart in her hand. Meng Yanlong wasn't paying attention and bumped into Chen Mo. Chen Mo turned around to look at Meng Yanlong and said to her seriously, "You're right, but I have one condition. Although I agreed to let you take responsibility, I hope that we can both leave some privacy for each other." Meng Yanlong didn't think about Chen Mo's condition at all. She directly agreed to Chen Mo's request. Okay. When Chen Mo got back home, he saw that his things had already been moved over. He glanced at Meng Yanlong, who seemed like a housekeeper, as she tidied up the room. He felt that Meng Yanlong's style of doing things was to not ask for his opinion, and then just do it directly. However, the thing that Chen Mo was curious about was that she wasn't letting him stay in his own room. But Chen Mo wouldn't be so shameless as to ask about it. At that moment, Meng Yanlong's phone rang. After seeing the caller ID, she first glanced at Chen Mo, and then went outside to answer the phone. "Sister? Zhaozhao told me that brother Chen Mo is at our house." She had high brows and a high nose. The sharp, distinct jawline outlined beautiful angles of her side profile. Hearing what Meng Shan had said, Meng Yanlong's eyes darkened. "Are you asking even though you know the answer?" There wasn't much of a foundation of feelings between Meng Yanlong and Meng Shan. It was just that she was fulfilling her responsibility as an older sister. If she knew that Meng Shan was bullying her future husband, she would absolutely not tolerate it, even if he was her younger brother. After all, in this situation, Meng Shan was the third party. Meng Shan knew that his older sister's temper wasn't that good. After hearing that, he could only bring the matter up directly. "I heard Zhaozhao say that you and brother Chen Mo have already. Is it true? But brother Chen Mo clearly hasn't broken up with Zhaozhao yet. How is it possible for him to be with you?" Meng Yanlong's eyes were deep and calm, filled with an indescribable coolness. She rarely smiled at others, especially people like Meng Shan, who were scheming and were bullying Chen Mo. Meng Shan, don't think that you can bully me just because you're my younger brother and we share a blood relation. I'm telling you, if you dare do anything else to Chen Mo, we won't have any interaction anymore. Meng Shan was very surprised by the change in Meng Yanlong's attitude. In the past, no matter what kind of trouble he had caused, or what kind of outrageous things he had done, Meng Yanlong would help him clean up the mess. But today, because of an outsider, she was saying such words that were severing their relationship. Sister, why have you changed so much that I don't even recognize you anymore? You weren't like this to me before. Meng Yanlong was not someone that would be won over with emotional appeals. After all, she wasn't Ye Zhaozhao. It's you who's changed, Meng Shan. She nodded slightly. Her tone was calm, as expected, and her beautiful eyes were as calm as ever. Don't come to me about your affairs anymore. Chapter 8. Chen Mo, who didn't know when he had started standing behind Meng Yanlong, crossed his arms over his chest and looked at Meng Yanlong with a probing gaze. Meng Yanlong's usual icy gaze, which kept people at a distance, had completely melted away, and not a trace of it was left when she was in front of him. She also didn't blame Chen Mo for eavesdropping behind her. After walking for so long, why don't you lie down on the sofa for a bit? At that moment, Chen Mo was still immersed in Meng Yanlong's appearance when she had scolded Meng Shan. It had left Meng Shan speechless, and he had felt that the anger within his heart had dissipated a lot. He also knew that in Meng Yanlong's eyes, she cared the most about him, and not her younger brother who liked to seduce other people's girlfriends. With just that, she was doing better than Ye Zhaozhao. Chen Mo was very happy. He went up to Meng Yanlong and gave her a simple hug. Meng Yanlong's hands were suspended in the air. She didn't know whether she should put her hands on Chen Mo's waist. She was hesitating, wondering if Chen Mo would be disgusted by her if she did. But driven by love, Meng Yanlong still decided to hug him gently. However, Chen Mo let go of her at that moment. Then, a rare, calm smile appeared on the corners of his lips. He said, "This is a reward for the words you just said." I loved hearing it. If Meng Yanlong were Ye Zhaozhao, she would probably ask Chen Mo for another kiss again, right? However, she wasn't as good as Ye Zhaozhao at flirting with men. Thank you. However, Chen Mo still couldn't help but think back. And if Meng Yanlong was really going to marry him, what would they do if Meng Shan absolutely didn't agree? Or if Ye Zhaozhao and Meng Shan got together, and Meng Shan had to call him brother-in-law, and even Ye Zhaozhao had to call him brother-in-law? Chen Mo only had to think about it, and he already felt that his heart would be very happy at that time. Imagining what Ye Zhaozhao's expression would be like, and Meng Shan's reluctance, his anger felt like it had disappeared a lot. Meng Yanlong saw that Chen Mo was spacing out, and he was also smiling in a way that looked like he wanted to laugh, but didn't want to. She could feel that Chen Mo was truly happy. What are you thinking about? Why are you so happy? Only then did Chen Mo realize that it was as if he had imagined himself as Meng Yanlong's husband. If Meng Yanlong knew, would it make her think that he had already decided to agree to her? Chen Mo shook his head. No, I just thought about some things. Meng Yanlong saw that Chen Mo didn't want to tell her directly, so she didn't ask any further. She first had the housekeeper prepare some food. She also told them every single thing about Chen Mo's preferences and things he couldn't eat. He had discovered that there were many surprises about Meng Yanlong that he hadn't discovered yet. After all, why did Meng Yanlong know his dietary restrictions in so much detail? On the other hand, Ye Zhaozhao, who had lived with him for 8 years, would occasionally forget about his dietary restrictions. But it was Meng Yanlong, who he had only met a few times, who loved him to an extreme degree. How was she able to endure watching the person she loved be close with her best friend every day? And she was still remembering all of his preferences and dietary restrictions. If this person was himself, he wouldn't be able to wait for someone for so long, or be so persistent. In the end, Ye Zhaozhao was just too far behind Meng Yanlong. Why? Why had he met Ye Zhaozhao first? Today, Chen Mo changed into a white suit. It was the first time Meng Yanlong had seen him to the point where she had lost the ability to think. Chen Mo was already good-looking to begin with. After putting on a good-looking, custom suit, he was basically even more handsome than the stars on TV. After all, Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Chen Mo saw that Meng Yanlong was still standing there spacing out, so he gently nudged her shyly. The housekeeper and the nanny, who were standing in the living room, were laughing at Meng Yanlong for being mesmerized by her own husband. When Meng Yanlong came back to her senses, she wanted to find something to hide behind, but there was nothing beside her. Then, she could only laugh awkwardly and say to Chen Mo, that suit looks really good on you. Chen Mo had heard Ye Zhaozhao say similar things before, but when he thought about it, it seemed like it had happened a very long time ago. It had also been a long time since Ye Zhaozhao had taken him to attend a similar banquet. At that moment, Meng Yanlong reached her hand out to him. "Let's go, my boyfriend." Then, Meng Yanlong led Chen Mo to the car. On the way to the banquet, Meng Yanlong first told Chen Mo that they were bound to run into Ye Zhaozhao and Meng Shan at the banquet. And Ye Zhaozhao's current situation was that she kept thinking that he was together with Meng Yanlong, just because she thought Chen Mo was planning to use that method to make Ye Zhaozhao jealous, and then come back to him. When Chen Mo heard these words, he felt that Ye Zhaozhao was not only very self-righteous, but she was also very much a slag. She was actually still keeping Meng Shan by her side under this situation, and she was saying that she hadn't fallen in love with Meng Shan. Now, why was she pretending to want to get him back? I know. When they entered, Meng Yanlong had Chen Mo put his arm around her waist, and they walked on the red carpet step by step. And this scene made many media members confused. Why was Ye Zhaozhao's boyfriend walking in with Meng Yanlong? Why was Meng Yanlong's younger brother, Meng Shan, walking with Ye Zhaozhao? But they didn't care about the reason behind it. They just thought that this news was going to make a big splash in the business world. So they took photos right away and prepared to send them out as the top stories. And Ye Zhaozhao came into the scene in Meng Yanlong's camera. She was speeding up the entire way, just to catch up with Chen Mo. Meng Shan, who was holding her, had completely forgotten about this. No matter how much Meng Shan reminded her, Ye Zhaozhao didn't slow down. Until Meng Shan suddenly twisted his foot and fell to the ground. Ye Zhaozhao didn't even turn her head back to look at him. The staff around them couldn't stand to watch anymore, and helped Meng Shan up and sent him into the banquet. But Ye Zhaozhao immediately grabbed Chen Mo's hand. Chen Mo stopped in his tracks, and then he looked over to his right. He knew that it had to be Ye Zhaozhao. This outcome didn't surprise Chen Mo at all. Meng Yanlong also grabbed Chen Mo's hand when she saw Ye Zhaozhao. "Let go!" Meng Yanlong shouted. Her actions drew many people's attention at the banquet. The edges of her face were very aggressive. It was as if she didn't care about the friendship they had had before with Ye Zhaozhao. Ye Zhaozhao also thought that Chen Mo was just angry, and said to Meng Yanlong, "Chen Mo is just using you to make me jealous." Meng Yanlong, are you being too self-righteous? Do you think that Chen Mo really likes you? Chen Mo has liked me for 8 years. Do you think that after just one night, Chen Mo would have already fallen in love with you? Then, Ye Zhaozhao had Chen Mo express his own opinion. Chen Mo first let go of both of their hands, and then said to Ye Zhaozhao seriously, "Ye Zhaozhao, aren't you being too self-righteous?" When she heard these words, the expectations and hope in Ye Zhaozhao's eyes instantly shattered. She started to panic. Ye Zhaozhao only felt flustered, pained, and embarrassed. It felt as if she got more nervous with every word she spoke, and with every step she took forward. It was as if all the blood in her body had rushed into her heart. She was suffering so much that she could hardly bear it. Ye Zhaozhao was still unwilling to believe it. She spoke to Chen Mo, as if she were trying to expose Chen Mo's lies. "Chen Mo, you've always been by my side for so many years. Not long ago, you even proposed to me. How is it possible that you don't love me anymore? Are you just angry? So you asked Meng Yanlong to pretend to be with you? You've loved me for 8 years. Chen Mo, do you want to get married? Let's get married. Let's get married right away." Chen Mo sneered. "Ye Zhaozhao, do you think I still care about that? You also know that I've been by your side for 8 years, but what have you done for me? Oh, right. You found a third party to stand between us." He took a deep breath, clenched his fist, and tried his best to suppress the fire in his heart. For him, you raced and ended up in the hospital. For him, you abandoned me without hesitation, even though you know that I'm scared of the rain and I'm scared of driving. And now, You want to marry me? Why don't you go marry your little lover? Ye Zhaozhao's face was pale. Large beads of sweat were beading up and dripping down. Her hand was tightly clenched, and she didn't even feel the pain of her fingernails digging into her skin. Chen Mo looked at Ye Zhaozhao's ugly expression, but he still couldn't say anything. He laughed twice. Why aren't you continuing? Didn't you say that you were bored of me after 8 years? So I asked to break up. What misunderstanding is there? What makes you think that I'm acting with Yin Long? Chen Mo had originally thought that when two people went from being friends to lovers, it should count as having gone through a year's worth of testing. If they still didn't break up, then it would prove that it wasn't just a passing infatuation. There were many people who only tasted love for a bit, like Ye Zhaozhao before. She was a player. But during that time, he and Ye Zhaozhao had both felt the emotional and physical happiness that love brought. Then, there was the 3rd year. It was said that the 3rd year was painful, and it was also a stage that was relatively difficult to overcome. The biggest difficulty was the change from being lovers to being married. There weren't many couples that could make it to their 3rd year, because they would have gone through their honeymoon stage during their 1st year, and the passion would fade a bit during the next 2 years, but they still loved each other. So, getting married at this time would be for the best. It was a pity that at that time, Ye Zhaozhao didn't have any intention of getting married. Chen Mo had always been waiting for Ye Zhaozhao to propose to him, but year after year, he never saw the end. He started to sense a change during their 5th year. Actually, he had already started to sense a change during their 4th year. Chen Mo felt that his life was becoming more and more mundane. Ye Zhaozhao also no longer shared any interesting things with him. She also wouldn't think about preparing any surprises for Chen Mo. So, all love still needed to change into affection. And this was the most critical and vulnerable period for the two of them. It was the biggest test of time for their relationship. It was the most difficult hurdle to cross. If they made it, they would all be happy. But if they didn't, they would just break up. Chapter 9. And the most important thing was the 7-year itch. In the end, Ye Zhaozhao still couldn't get over that itch, and she found a mistress outside. They thought that they would be okay during their 7th year, but when they reached the 8th year, she had finally shown her true colors. As Ye Zhaozhao listened to the words that Chen Mo was saying, she slowly understood that it really was because Chen Mo had heard the words she had said to her friend. That's why he had so decisively asked to break up with her. However, Ye Zhaozhao still felt that she couldn't leave Chen Mo. These past few days, whenever she woke up at home, she would feel anxious when Chen Mo wasn't by her side. She would call Chen Mo's phone, but the calls to Chen Mo's phone wouldn't go through. Although Mengshan looked a lot like Chen Mo from back then, his actions, words, and ability to pay attention were far less than Chen Mo's. Mengshan didn't even know what Ye Zhaozhao couldn't eat, and what she was allergic to. He also kept bothering her while she was busy with work. He would ask her to buy him things, and he would ask her to go out and play with him. Ye Zhaozhao had had enough of that kind of life, and she actually felt that life was more happy, normal, and peaceful with Chen Mo. Moreover, the Yi family had been urging her to get married, leaving her helpless. I'm sorry, Chen Mo. Those things I said before were just impulsive words that I said without thinking. I didn't mean them. I was also out of it for a moment. I know that I was wrong. Chen Mo, Ye Zhaozhao, we don't owe each other anything anymore. When Ye Zhaozhao heard these words, she immediately grabbed Chen Mo's hand. Don't go, Chen Mo. Can you give me another chance? As long as you're willing to come back to my side, we can get married right away. Chen Mo struggled for a long time, but he couldn't get away. Seeing this, Meng Yanlong immediately grabbed Ye Zhaozhao's chin. Meng Yanlong's eyes were sinister, and her hand that was grabbing her shoulder was trembling. Looking at this stance, Chen Mo felt that Meng Yanlong was about to attack Ye Zhaozhao. In the end, seeing that the people around them were all looking at them, he told them to go to another place to continue talking. Ye Zhaozhao looked at Meng Yanlong in disbelief. I never imagined that it would be you who took Chen Mo away. When did you start liking Chen Mo? Meng Yanlong felt that the matter had already reached this point, so there was nothing left to hide. A long time ago, even before you. At that moment, Ye Zhaozhao seemed to have suddenly thought of something. The veins on her forehead were faintly bulging, and her eyes were only filled with anger. At that moment, she let go of his hand. Then, She clenched her right fist tightly and hit the brick wall hard. Okay, Meng Yanlong, I treated you like a real friend, and I even helped you. Take care of your younger brother. You just wanted to use your younger brother, and then cause me and Chen Mo to break up. Then, you could take advantage of this situation? Am I right? Meng Yanlong frowned and glanced at Ye Zhaozhao. She snorted vaguely, as if she were feeling helpless, and then started to clap for her. It was as if she were sighing, and also as if she was mocking the outrageousness of Ye Zhaozhao's imagination. But during that time, Meng Yanlong's expression changed slightly. At the same time, she took all of Chen Mo's reactions into her sight. While her face was still expressionless, a trace of imperceptible warmth had appeared in her eyes. It seemed that Chen Mo didn't believe Ye Zhaozhao's nonsense either. Ye Zhaozhao, Ye Zhaozhao. It's clearly your own fault, but you're blaming it on me? Her deep, dark eyes were like ice that would never melt, making those who met her gaze unable to help but feel a chill. But Ye Zhaozhao kept insisting that this matter had something to do with Meng Yanlong. Otherwise, why did you happen to return to the country at this time? And why was it just at the time that my relationship with Chen Mo broke down? It did sound somewhat reasonable. Meng Yanlong looked at Ye Zhaozhao, shrugged her shoulders, and acted as if she didn't care at all. Okay, then you can call Meng Shan over too, and then see if I and Meng Shan plan this together. Without saying anything, Ye Zhaozhao took out her phone and called Meng Shan. Meng Shan picked up the phone just as quickly as before. But as soon as the phone was answered, they heard Meng Shan crying, I fell, Sister Zhaozhao. At that moment, Ye Zhaozhao remembered that when she had walked on the red carpet, she hadn't paid attention to Meng Shan's feelings. He had indeed fallen. She immediately apologized. I'm sorry. I was too anxious to see Chen Mo at that time. After saying that, his tears began to fall in strings, and he only blamed all the mistakes on himself. Don't blame yourself, Sister Zhaozhao. It's all my fault. I always cause trouble for Sister Zhaozhao. I just wasn't walking steadily. At that moment, Chen Mo stood there and witnessed Meng Shan's methods. At the same time, he also looked at Ye Zhaozhao with a contemptuous gaze. He never thought that Ye Zhaozhao would like that type of boy at this age. No, it's my fault, but there's one thing that I want to ask you. Meng Shan hummed like he was being spoiled. Then, they heard Ye Zhaozhao ask, did your relationship with me have anything to do with your older sister? However, Meng Shan was much smarter than Ye Zhaozhao had imagined. Meng Shan asked Ye Zhaozhao tentatively, is my sister there too? Because he knew that he couldn't say the wrong thing. If he said something that he shouldn't have, he probably wouldn't even be able to return to the Meng family. When Ye Zhaozhao saw that Meng Shan had already seen through her, she told Meng Shan the truth directly. Yes, your sister and Chen Mo are here with me. Meng Shan asked them where they were, and he would go there himself. His reason was that it wasn't convenient to talk over the phone, and that he couldn't explain everything clearly. Soon, Meng Shan found them. Ye Zhaozhao looked at Meng Shan as he limped in. In the end, out of guilt, she still helped Meng Shan. But in Chen Mo's eyes, that meant that she was still not going to change. She still said that she hadn't fallen in love with Meng Shan. Everything she said was a lie. Meng Shan might have sensed Meng Yanlong's cold gaze and looked at Ye Zhaozhao with a pitiful appearance. He was hiding behind Ye Zhaozhao, and strings of tears kept falling from his eyes. The ends of his eyes were red, and he said, Sister Zhaozhao, my sister doesn't want me to be with you at all. So how could I have fallen in love with you because of my sister? My sister even scolded me because of this, but I just can't leave Sister Zhaozhao. Sister Zhaozhao, do you like me? Didn't Sister Zhaozhao say before that you liked me? Ye Zhaozhao immediately pushed Meng Shan away and said to Chen Mo, it's not like that, Chen Mo. It's not like what he said. I really don't like him. Meng Shan carefully grabbed the hem of her clothes. The tone of his voice was broken and heartrending, and it also had a hint of disbelief. Sister Zhaozhao, you weren't like this to me before. Chen Mo shrugged his shoulders. His expression was very calm, as if he was watching a farce play out in front of him. Ye Zhaozhao, look at why you two have different stories to tell. She stood next to Chen Mo and looked at Ye Zhaozhao, who was disregarding everything in order to get Chen Mo back. The smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. She was noble and aloof. But for Meng Shan, After hearing what Chen Mo had said, a smile appeared on the corners of his lips. That smile was quickly seen by Chen Mo. However, Chen Mo didn't have any intention of exposing him. After all, the result of this matter was just what he wanted. Mengshan also saw that Chen Mo had seen him but didn't expose him, and it seemed like he understood something. Then, he bit his lips daintily, and his two large, wet eyes blinked innocently. He reached out and directly put his arm around Ye Zhaozhao, saying, "Sister Zhaozhao, look, Brother Chen Mo is already with my older sister. Brother Chen Mo won't like you anymore. Be with me, okay? I truly love Sister Zhaozhao." Ye Zhaozhao had just broken free of Meng Shan's arm when she glanced at Meng Yanlong and Chen Mo. Then, Meng Yanlong kissed Chen Mo on the lips in front of everyone. At that moment, a triumphant look appeared on her face, as if she were declaring her ownership to Ye Zhaozhao. At that moment, Chen Mo happened to turn his head, and he also happened to meet Meng Yanlong's lingering smile. He couldn't help but think that, even as a cold beauty, she was still able to smile. Perhaps this was a secret between the two of them? These actions, and Meng Shan's words, had practically enraged Ye Zhaozhao. Ye Zhaozhao didn't care about Meng Shan's entanglement anymore, and just kept saying those words to Chen Mo. But now Chen Mo couldn't listen to a single word. He didn't believe any of the things that Ye Zhaozhao was saying. Ye Zhaozhao's bloodshot eyes were as red as a ghost, and she kept trying to get closer to Chen Mo. Almost instinctively, Meng Yanlong protected Chen Mo behind her, but Ye Zhaozhao had learned Taekwondo. Chen Mo was very worried that Ye Zhaozhao would make a real move at that moment. He was also afraid that anyone would get hurt because of him. So, he said to Ye Zhaozhao, "Calm down. We can talk it out." But it seemed like Ye Zhaozhao had seen through it at that moment. She understood that Chen Mo wouldn't listen to her explanation anymore. She spoke mockingly. "Chen Mo, aren't you just being seduced by a scoundrel like Meng Yanlong? It's okay. I'll show you her true colors, and you'll come back to my side." She stood to the side and glanced at Ye Zhaozhao with a calm expression. Her face still had that same unchanging, cold expression. There wasn't a single trace of panic. Even though she knew that Ye Zhaozhao was planning on making a move, she still protected Chen Mo behind her. "I'm telling you, Ye Zhaozhao, if you have the guts, then come at me. Don't do anything that will hurt Chen Mo, otherwise I will truly look down on you." Chapter 10. Without a word, Ye Zhaozhao's fist connected with Meng Yanling's face. The impact sent Meng Yanling staggering, blood already welling at the corner of her mouth. Chen Mo was stunned for a long moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The next instant, he was rushing to support Meng Yanling, turning to the enraged Ye Zhaozhao. "What are you doing?" "Ye Zhaozhao." But Ye Zhaozhao was lost in her own world, completely unresponsive. It was as if Chen Mo's words only fueled her fury. Standing at the door, Meng Shan watched in shocked disbelief as Ye Zhaozhao actually attacked his sister. He stood frozen, unsure of what to do. What could he do? Seeing that Ye Zhaozhao was ignoring him completely, Chen Mo turned his attention to Meng Shan still standing at the doorway. "Meng Shan, go get security now. Get her away from us," he yelled. Meng Shan hesitated, his body trembling violently. He looked at his injured sister one more time before finally bolting out the door. Ye Zhaozhao felt her blood surging, the thought of Meng Yanling and Meng Shan's interference having destroyed her 8-year relationship, with Chen Mo fueling her rage. The desire for revenge sharpened in her fingertips, her hands clenching into fists that cracked and popped. Seeing Ye Zhaozhao approaching, step by step, Chen Mo instinctively shielded Meng Yanling. However, Meng Yanling quickly pushed him behind her, taking the blows herself, each strike landing on her back. Chen Mo could almost hear the bones breaking. He could feel just how much force Ye Zhaozhao was using, but Meng Yanling stood resolute, protecting him from the relentless attack. Chen Mo screamed at Ye Zhaozhao to stop. "Ye Zhaozhao, if you keep hitting her, I'll never forgive you." Those words seemed to finally get through to her, at least enough to give them a moment of respite. Chen Mo seized the opportunity to pull Meng Yanling from behind him, placing himself between her and Ye Zhaozhao. Ye Zhaozhao's mind was reeling, echoing Chen Mo's threat. "If you keep hitting her, I'll never forgive you. Never forgive you." her face contorted with rage as she struggled to speak. Chen Mo, you'd never forgive me, all for this woman? If not for the fear of provoking Ye Zhaozhao further, Chen Mo would have unleashed all the words that were screaming in his heart. He wanted her to see herself, what she had become. How could she possibly have the audacity to judge others? Ye Zhaozhao, if you continued down this path, your life was going to be ruined. Ye Zhaozhao, I advise you, what happened between you and I, that's our problem. Meng Xin and Meng Yinling had nothing to do with it. Think about what you did when you were with Meng Shan, all the things you did for him, how much it hurt me when you threw me away. Did you ever think about what I was feeling? I spent 8 years with you. 8 years, and it wasn't enough compared to some boy who appeared a few months ago? These words seemed to have an effect on her, the madness in her eyes beginning to recede. She began to explain herself. Chen Mo, Meng Shan reminded me so much of you from 8 years ago. It was like seeing you again. Ghost from my past, the way I chased after you. I was just deluded for a moment, really. I thought I was seeing you. I thought I was with you. Chen Mo began to accept that Ye Zhaozhao was beyond reason. Meng Shan was Meng Shan. Chen Mo was Chen Mo. Even if they were similar, it was just an excuse she was using to justify her actions. He needed to stay calm, to wait until Meng Shan returned with security. Ye Zhaozhao, I have a question for you. Ye Zhaozhao nodded eagerly, her eyes fixed on Chen Mo. What is it, Chen Mo? If it can make you forgive me, I'll tell you anything. Chen Mo lowered his gaze, stealing a glance at Meng Yinling who, though clearly injured, remained conscious leaning against the wall. Why didn't you want to marry me sooner? I proposed 3 times. Why didn't you accept a single time? Ye Zhaozhao was silent for a long moment, before slowly lowering her hands. I don't know. I felt lost. I didn't know how we would be after we were married. I didn't know how to take care of you, and the thought of having kids, I wasn't ready. Chen Mo's eyes locked onto Ye Zhaozhao's. Then why did you lie and say that you were against marriage? Why didn't you just say you weren't ready? I would have understood, but what you said before, about being against marriage, it just felt like you were just trying to string me along. Ye Zhaozhao became flustered, grabbing Chen Mo's hand, her tone becoming tender and pleading. Chen Mo, let's start over. I really can't lose you. We can get married right away. We can have children. If you just come back to me, I'll do anything. But then, Meng Yinling ran her tongue along the inside of her mouth and spat out, as if, you? Chen Mo had intended to keep Ye Zhaozhao distracted with small talk until the guards arrived, but the moment Meng Yinling spoke, a chill ran down his spine. Without thinking, he jumped in front of Meng Yinling to shield her. Ye Zhaozhao didn't react, but seeing how worried Chen Mo was about Meng Yinling, the anger she had barely managed to suppress flared anew. Chen Mo, is Meng Yinling that important to you? Are you that worried about her? Chen Mo knew that his actions had provoked her again, but decided that it was just another punch he had to take. It wasn't that big of a deal. Ye Zhaozhao rushed forward, her fist clenched, but Chen Mo kept her shielded, preventing her from getting close. The longer Chen Mo protected her, the more enraged Ye Zhaozhao became. When? At what point did Meng Yinling standing in Chen Mo's heart become higher than hers? To the point that he would shield her? Did Chen Mo know that she wouldn't actually hurt him? Ye Zhaozhao slammed her fist into the wall, the rage in her eyes still pouring out. She gasped for breath, her features so fierce that Chen Mo couldn't bear to look at her. Finally, Chen Mo heard a commotion outside. He knew Meng Shan had brought security. A wave of relief washed over him. Seeing Ye Zhaozhao's menacing appearance, the security guards immediately restrained her. Meng Shan, despite being an interloper, still had a conscience. Seeing Meng Yinling, he tried to console her. Sister, just hold on a little longer. I've called an ambulance. The doctors will be here soon. Meng Yinling glanced at Meng Shan with indifference before turning to Chen Mo and trying to reassure him. I'm fine, don't worry. Meng Shan glared at Chen Mo, unable to understand how one man could bewitch 2 women. Only after seeing Ye Zhaozhao subdued did Meng Yinling finally allow herself to faint. Chen Mo took Meng Yinling to the hospital, but decided not to press charges against Ye Zhaozhao. If he called the police, she might go to prison. And ultimately, It was his fault this happened. He couldn't bring himself to send the woman he had loved for 8 years to jail. Looking at Ming Yinling in bed, covered in bandages, he knew it was time for him to move on. Chen Mo left Ming Yinling in Meng Shun's care for the time being. Although they didn't have a good relationship, Ming Yinling was Meng Shin's only source of financial security. Money bound them. Chen Mo returned home and walked straight into his bedroom towards a storage cabinet. He pulled out a box and looked down at it with a heavy heart. He had originally planned to keep these things as a memento, but now he didn't think it was necessary. Bad memories could only become a burden. People had to move on. The box was filled with the gifts and letters Ye Zhaozhao had given him, starting from 8 years ago when she first pursued him. The woman who had once loved him to the point of madness was gone. She was gone from his heart. He could still remember every word of every letter. When he first received them, Chen Mo hadn't even bothered to open the packages. But once he'd fallen for her, he had read them countless times. His heart would still flutter. He once asked her how she could suddenly change after all her past relationships. Chen Mo remembered her response clearly. It was a standard response from a free-spirited woman. He took the box and hailed a cab to go find Ye Zhaozhao. When Ye Zhaozhao saw Chen Mo standing before her, her first thought was that she was dreaming. Why else would Chen Mo be here at this time? But then Chen Mo spoke. Ye Zhaozhao, I think we need to have a proper breakup. Ye Zhaozhao laughed, realizing it was not a dream, but it wasn't a good thing either. If only he had come to visit her normally. Instead, he came with the intention to cut ties. Could their relationship really be broken that easily? She had believed that she was tired after 8 years. But the moment she received word that he wanted to break up, she realized that she couldn't leave Chen Mo. Over the years, despite the lack of surprises and mystery, weren't relationships supposed to transform from fiery passion to mundane comfort? Then you have children and raise them. And that's how life goes. Chen Mo, I don't want you to leave. Chapter 11. Ye Zhaozhao's fists trembled, her eyes filled with regret and heartbreak, her voice hoarse with emotion. Chen Mo placed the box on the table in front of her and opened it slowly, revealing all the things that Ye Zhaozhao had once given him. Ye Zhaozhao was visibly surprised to see these things. You kept all this? He picked up a love letter and stared at it, seemingly lost in memory. He had a calm expression. In this moment, Ye Zhaozhao saw the cool, distant Chen Mo she had known in the beginning. I asked you a question earlier. Your response was, if you see someone you don't like at first glance, then the relationship will be doomed. I had another question I wanted to ask. Does that mean your previous relationships ended because you didn't like them at first glance? After speaking, Chen Mo looked towards Ye Zhaozhao. The moment their eyes met, Chen Mo saw a strange glint in her normally gentle gaze, a hint of fear that flickered and then quickly vanished. I guess, yeah. Only you. You felt different. Different? Chen Mo was silent, his silence as sharp as a sword hanging over her head. It felt like it was about to pierce her heart and leave her shattered. This fear and uncertainty was the first time that Ye Zhaozhao felt so lost. But what she said made sense. First impressions were important for any relationship. People were drawn together by a mysterious force, and compatible souls would be naturally attracted to one another. Ye Zhaozhao was saying that they were drawn to each other, that Chen Mo possessed a coolness and mysteriousness that captivated her. But now, it was like she knew everything there was to know about Chen Mo and couldn't find that feeling anymore. So she found a new man, and only after realizing the error of her ways did she want to come crawling back. Chen Mo was standing in the stream of sunlight that flowed in from the window, the golden light reflecting off his body. But the aura that hung about him felt like he was standing under the cool moonlight, making him look both noble and distant. It's not the people you like at first sight that are meant to be. It's the people that stay by your side until the end. Just like the two of them. Even though they liked each other at first sight, they still drifted apart. People you love at first sight are a gift. Just don't lose them and regret it for the rest of your life. These 8 years, it was enough for Chen Mo to learn that Ye Zhaozhao wasn't his partner for life. He had to take this as a lesson. His first reaction was to not trust anyone and to not believe in love. But when he met Ming Yinling, he realized he needed to change. It was a reminder that he should cherish those who loved and cared for him. Although he did not have deep feelings for Meng Yinling yet, as long as the time and person were right, he could live a peaceful life with her after marriage. So Chen Mo figured it all out, and in Ye Zhaozhao's letters he found the answer to his long-lasting question. Don't hesitate to show affection and never lose faith in the people around you. The world will always bring warmth, and people will always bring surprises. Don't reject someone who loves you wholeheartedly just because of your bad experiences. Ye Zhaozhao, if you had just accepted my proposal, we might have become each other's soulmates. But you threw me away. Ye Zhaozhao desperately tried to avoid the fact that Chen Mo didn't love her anymore. She was numb to her own feelings, always thinking that after 8 years the passion would fade. She was tired of Chen Mo, but she never thought about what she would do if they were to break up. Could she really leave him? Because she couldn't do it, she only told her friends what she was feeling. She was trying her best to hold back her tears, but her trembling hands gave her away. Can't you give me another chance, Chen Mo? A ray of sunlight cut through the paper window, revealing a path of light. Words needed to be said. Then who is going to give Meng Yinling a chance? I gave you 8 years. This was my first real relationship. Before, I didn't believe in love, and that there was someone out there who deserved all my love and time. You appeared, and it was as if I was running free in a vast open meadow. I hope it was for the last time, because the person I want to spend my life with is you. Even though you rejected me and ignored me so many times, I kept on forgiving you. Ye Zhaozhao wanted to respond, but all that came out was a sob. Her words were incoherent. Chen Mo had made himself clear. There was nothing she could say. He didn't believe that she never considered marrying him, because only marriage could really bind a person to another. Chen Mo searched his memories and remembered a promise she once made to him. Hello, this is Ye Zhaozhao. How are you? When the plums ripen, you know that spring is gone, and the feelings are even stronger. This is the most fitting sentence I read in a book I read today. I was instantly drawn to you the moment I saw you at school. The sun is beautiful today, and the wind smells like osmanthus. It's sweet like your hair. I can hear the cicadas and the birds. The feeling is wonderful. Summer is here. I want to take you to see the lotus flowers in my hometown. I also want to go bungee jumping with you. Although, I'm not sure if you would like that. I haven't tried it before either. I just think the thrill of doing it together can bring us closer. Chen Mo, I like you. I'm very straightforward when I like someone. I hope you won't feel burdened. I don't need a response, but I would be more than happy to hear that you like me back. 2. My future husband. Chen Mo, without waiting for her to speak, said slowly, So, why did you call me your husband? Did you not consider marrying me at the time? He wanted to hear her explanation. He wanted to hear her admit that those words were only meant to deceive him so that he could move on more easily. I wrote those letters to get your attention, to make you remember me. So it meant that she never had the intention to marry him? All right. He sneered inwardly, but outwardly said, I know. Otherwise, after being with me for so long, you would have proposed to me. But Chen Mo, I actually did consider it before. Before was before, and now is now. Ye Zhaozhao, some things have happened, and there's no way we can fix them. Chen Mo chose an older-looking letter from the box. If Chen Mo remembered correctly, this one was her first letter to him. Before I met you, I didn't believe in love at first sight. Although I don't have a good reputation in school, I'm willing to sever ties with every boy I've had contact with. I won't talk to other girls either. My eyes and my heart are only for you. It's like the answer to the function is love for you, and all of my words eventually lead to you. I don't know how to express the burning feelings in my heart, but I know one thing for sure. I love you. Chen Mo remembered opening this letter when he first received it out of curiosity. The words and affection were the most straightforward and direct form of love he had ever received. Chen Mo placed the letter back in the box before closing it up. Then he returned the whole thing to Ye Zhaozhao. Although once a gift is given, it isn't supposed to be taken back, but she doesn't need it anymore. And if he didn't return it, these memories would only end up in a dumpster. I remember when you first chased after me, I told you that one day, all the gifts you gave me would be proof that you once loved me. See? It's all come true, hasn't it? Ye Zhaozhao placed her hands on the box, her eyes lowered. She didn't say anything. There was nothing else to say. Chen Mo took a long breath before looking at Ye Zhaozhao very seriously. Ye Zhaozhao, let's break up? Ye Zhaozhao's lips were trembling. She took a deep breath despite the pain. Memories of Chen Mo flashed repeatedly in her mind. She finally forced out, okay. Upon hearing Ye Zhaozhao's agreement, Chen Mo's face, which had been cold and distant, finally showed a hint of warmth. Then goodbye. Ye Zhaozhao watched Chen Mo leave in a daze, her eyes stinging. She turned to look at the things on the table, remaining silent for a long time. On his way to the hospital, Chen Mo received a call from Meng Yanling. Chen Mo, where are you? Chen Mo felt a sense of relief, and it was apparent in his voice. I went to talk to Ye Zhaozhao. From now on, we shouldn't be in contact. Chapter 12. Meng Yanling was momentarily speechless, but a subtle smile played at the corners of her eyes. You. Then she heard Chen Mo speak from the other side of the phone. I'm on my way to the hospital now. I brought you food. Meng Yanling didn't ask any questions, but she already had a good guess of what had happened. Once Chen Mo cut ties with Ye Zhaozhao, it was a sign that he was done with the past. He was making a decision to move on, which was also a sign that he was finally accepting her. Okay, be careful on the road. Meng Yanling was sitting beside Meng Shan, who was peeling an apple for her. When he was done, he handed it to Meng Yanling, but she ignored it. Sis, have some fruit. Meng Yanling didn't even glance at it. When Meng Shan placed the apple in front of her face, she pushed his hand away. She said coldly, I'm not hungry. At that moment, the door to the ward was pushed open. When Meng Yanling saw Chen Mo entering with food, Meng Shan saw a warm smile appear on his sister's face, but it only seemed to be reserved for him. Chen Mo. Meng Shan glared at Chen Mo, but he could only stay quiet. Chen Mo glanced back at Meng Shan before walking up to Meng Yanling. What did you do to your brother? He put the food on the nightstand before sitting down to straighten out her blankets. Meng Yanling raised an eyebrow. I didn't eat the apple he peeled. Chen Mo began to open the container. Is that it? He probably thinks you're playing favorites. Her eyes were deep and dark, but it was obvious that there was tenderness hidden within them. You know him better than I do. Men were often the best at understanding each other. The way Meng Shan was acting, it seemed more like jealousy and anger. Meng Yanling didn't want to talk about Meng Shan, so she changed the subject. What did you get me? Chen Mo opened the container, and Meng Yanling could smell the fragrant scent of wontons. Seeing that Chen Mo wasn't responding, she guessed by the smell, wontons? Seeing how quickly she had guessed, Chen Mo asked if she often ate them. Not really, I just loved eating them when I was a kid. Chen Mo nodded and was about to hand Meng Yanling the bowl of wontons. But Meng Yanling stared at him with a blank expression, her hands remaining at her sides. What's wrong? Meng Yanling looked at her own injuries, before looking at Chen Mo. When she realized that Chen Mo didn't understand her, she spoke directly, It's hard for me to eat with my hands right now. Chen Mo wanted to argue, but he saw that Meng Yanling was serious. He thought that since it was his fault that she was hurt, it wouldn't hurt to look after her for a little bit. And if she was hurt, forcing her to eat on her own didn't seem morally right. So, Chen Mo didn't say anything else, and he began to use a spoon to pick up a wonton, blew on it, and then fed it to Meng Yanling. Meng Yanling had a smug, satisfied expression that made it hard for Chen Mo not to think that she was only faking her inability to eat on her own. It had been a beautiful day, but now it was pouring rain outside. A sudden crack of thunder startled Chen Mo, making his hand with the bowl tremble, but he continued to feed Meng Yanling her wontons. Meng Yanling was very perceptive. She remembered how Chen Mo had looked the day he found her in the rain. He was completely different, dazed, and even a little scared. She carefully asked, Are you scared of the rain? Chen Mo wasn't surprised that she had figured it out. Although he tried to pretend that it didn't bother him, he was clearly troubled. Yeah. Although it wasn't polite to bring up someone else's pain, some things had to be dealt with. He couldn't let his past become a poison in his life. Meng Yanling was about to say something, but Chen Mo quickly saw through her intentions. I've already thought about it, but mental scars aren't so easy to overcome. To be honest, I've been trying so hard for years, but I still can't forget what happened that rainy day. If it weren't for them being with him, they would have had families, living happy and fulfilled lives. Chen Mo would have been able to visit his parents. He could have had new siblings. But all of that was taken away because they were with him, which caused the tragedy to occur. Meng Yanling didn't say anything more about it. She stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks before she could barely leave. She couldn't do any strenuous activities, nor could she be on her feet for a long time. Chen Mo would often accompany Meng Yanling to the park, and they would watch TV at home together. One day, Chen Mo noticed that Meng Yanling had a piano in her room. When she realized that Chen Mo was interested in it, Meng Yanling taught him a simple piece. Now that Ye Zhaozhao was no longer a threat, and Chen Mo had been staying under her roof for quite some time, she decided to make a request of Chen Mo. Chen Mo stared at Meng Yanling, wondering what her request might be. He thought it might be something outrageous, but instead, Meng Yanling spoke softly. "Chen Mo, could you dance a solo for me?" Chen Mo paused, unsure what to say. Meng Yanling then said, "I'll play the piano, and you can dance. Let's see it as a way to celebrate my recovery." Chen Mo didn't think it was too much to ask, so he agreed. He went back to his room to change into a clean shirt. He was ready, waiting for Meng Yanling's music. Meng Yanling was trying to choose a song that would be appropriate. Looking at Chen Mo's outfit, she finally chose one that she thought would suit him. When the music began, Chen Mo began to move in sync with the rhythm. The music flowed with his body movements, and it was as if he was being accompanied by countless butterflies. He danced like a fairy. Meng Yanling was completely captivated by what she was seeing. It was as if the world only consisted of the two of them. At that moment, Chen Mo looked at Meng Yanling as she played the piano, and he thought that she was glowing. Even though Chen Mo had become more comfortable and natural around Meng Yanling, he still hadn't revealed his true feelings to her. Chen Mo was willing to wait, but Meng Yanling was not. After 8 years, it was normal for someone to get excited when they finally got what they wanted. Meng Yanling sat in her room, planning her next move when she heard a knock on her door. Realizing that it might be Chen Mo, she asked, "What is it?" "You can come in." Chen Mo peeked his head inside the door. Seeing how worried Chen Mo looked, Meng Yanling was filled with worry. He walked into the room and closed the door before saying very seriously, "I've made a decision. I'm going to overcome my fear of the rain and driving." Although Chen Mo didn't know if Meng Yanling would ever change her mind about him, he thought it would be better to take matters into his own hands. After all, you can't always hail a taxi, and it rains at random times. Only by solving these problems could he finally find himself again. For some reason, Meng Yanling felt relieved when she heard his decision. "Okay, I'll be with you tomorrow." Meng Yanling checked the weather forecast, and it said there was an 80% chance of rain the next day. Chen Mo was assured by Meng Yanling's support, so he went back to his room to sleep. The next day, Chen Mo was awoken by the sound of thunder. He got up to open his curtains and looked at the pouring rain. He suddenly regretted saying what he said the night before. But if he were to run away, then it would be as if he had let down Meng Yanling. He bit his lip, put on some casual clothes, and left his room. He was surprised to see Meng Yanling sitting on the sofa. It looked like she had been waiting for a long time. "Are you ready?" Chen Mo took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Meng Yanling sat him down in the driver's seat and carefully put on his seatbelt. Chen Mo shakily gripped the steering wheel, taking deep breaths continuously. He sat for almost an hour and still couldn't do it. Seeing how pale Chen Mo was, and the beads of sweat covering his forehead, Meng Yanling began to feel bad. So she unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned towards Chen Mo. She tried to comfort him. "Chen Mo, you have to calm down. You have to control yourself. Just think that you need to drive. If you can't do it, it's okay. The fact that you even had the courage to do it is already admirable." Chen Mo listened to Meng Yanling's words. He was about to say something when he accidentally bumped Meng Yanling's lips. Although Meng Yanling looked cool and distant, the moment that love came into the picture, it was like she could bewitch anyone. Seeing that Chen Mo didn't move, Meng Yanling leaned in, pressing herself closer to Chen Mo. She did nothing, waiting for him to give her permission, to give her a kiss that could also double as a romantic declaration. The temperature inside the car began to rise rapidly. Chen Mo felt as if he was suffocating. He could no longer think clearly. He raised his head and kissed Meng Yinling's lips, looking for oxygen, trying to break the stalemate between his logic and desire. But Chen Mo was able to pull himself back quickly. Chen Mo could clearly feel his heart beating like crazy, trying to break free from his ribcage. Even though he wasn't feeling the same passion as before, why wasn't his heart listening to reason? His skin was burning wherever she had touched him. It was as if all she had to do was touch him to make him lose all control. Chen Mo and Meng Yinling were both aware that they shouldn't go too far in the car, especially since Chen Mo hadn't given her his final answer. Since Meng Yinling's initial goal had been achieved, it was time to call it quits. Meng Yinling quickly sat back in her seat, trying to calm herself before pointing to the steering wheel, signaling for Chen Mo to start driving again. Chen Mo was well aware of his situation, and he could only use the word pathetic to describe himself. He tried to straighten the wrinkles in his clothes before clearing his throat. Shall we start? By asking that question, Chen Mo was showing that he was dealing with things rationally. He wasn't going to say more, nor would he pursue it any further, because he knew that he wouldn't win if he were to keep talking. So he once again mustered up the courage to press the accelerator. But they only went a meter before he hit the brakes. After another 30 minutes, Meng Yinling, seeing how much he was struggling, decided that it might be better if he were to give up. She was about to say something when the sudden downpour of rain and thunder interrupted her. Chen Mo, who was sitting in the driver's seat, felt like someone was covering his mouth and nose. He couldn't breathe. He was weak and lost all reason in that split second. It was like he had lost his target and lost the ability to think rationally. He could only curl up to the safest place he could find. He couldn't see anything. He extended his shaking hands out, trying to find something, anything he could rely on. It could even be a wall. But he couldn't find anything to support him. His eyebrows were furrowed, his eyes tightly shut, sweat already running down his forehead and temples. He tried to look for something to hold on to. The sound in his ears were piercing, making his ears ache, and he wanted nothing more than to leave that place. After a while, Chen Mo realized that he couldn't move his body, as if something was holding him down. But Chen Mo couldn't think about that. All he could do was grab onto that thing. He was like a kite that had broken free and finally clung onto a branch for dear life. The thunder came suddenly, and it left just as suddenly. He felt something bright in front of him. When Chen Mo slowly regained his sense of reality, he felt something cold and comforting touching his forehead. The warmth he was holding became more real. When he realized who he was holding on to, it was Meng Yinling. He always thought that he would have to deal with this fear until he either fainted or died. He thought that he could never get rid of this fear. It was always there, even if it was only suppressed for a moment. But wherever he was touched by Meng Yinling, there was warmth. He could still feel the warmth on his forehead. Chen Mo finally understood that he wasn't beyond saving. He was only sick from being without her. Chapter 13. However, Meng Yinling's temperature seemed a bit too high just now. She seemed to have a fever. Seeing how anxious and worried Meng Yinling was, Chen Mo actually felt a little happy inside. Meng Yinling, Chen Mo? Chen Mo? Chen Mo snapped back to reality and looked at Meng Yinling. After she called his name twice, he was a bit puzzled. What's wrong? It was the first time Chen Mo saw such a serious expression on Meng Yinling's face. And then, her usual cold demeanor seemed to disappear. I called you, and you didn't even acknowledge me. Was it so bad that you couldn't hear me? There was no need to lie about this. The answer was undeniably the truth. Yeah. Meng Yinling stated her thoughts seriously. If it's really too difficult, you don't need to keep forcing yourself. I'll pick you up from now on. I'll be your personal driver. But Chen Mo wasn't planning on giving up halfway. He had already taken this first step, and if he didn't push through and find some success, he would feel like he was letting himself down after being so scared earlier. Seeing how determined Chen Mo was, Meng Yinling gave a helpless smile. She was the one who wanted Chen Mo to confront his past trauma, but now it was her heart that ached. Okay, don't worry. I'll always be by your side. After many attempts, Chen Mo only managed to drive a short distance. If he didn't stop after a meter, then he'd slam on the brakes. Meng Yinling expected this, but then Chen Mo drove a whole 100 meters. Meng Yinling believed that Chen Mo had finally overcome his fear, so she started to encourage him. But just as she said that, Chen Mo hit the brakes again. The momentum caused Meng Yinling to slam forward. She had unbuckled her seatbelt earlier, but didn't buckle it again. Her back hit the seat hard. The bone in her back hadn't fully healed yet. She gasped, but kept it quiet when she saw the look of happiness on Chen Mo's face. So, she continued to sit with him. But Chen Mo saw that something was wrong. Her temperature wasn't normal either. "Yinling, are you not feeling well?" Meng Yinling frowned, but immediately put on a smile and leaned closer to Chen Mo, whispering in his ear, "Chen Mo, I'm a little tired." Chen Mo instantly reached out to feel her forehead. She really had a fever? When did you start running a fever? Meng Yinling thought for a moment. It must have been this morning. Chen Mo was angry when he heard this. "You had a fever, but you didn't say anything? You still came with me to practice driving in this heavy rain?" Meng Yinling lowered her head, looking a bit wronged. "I promised yesterday I would come with you. I can't go back on my word. You don't have to torture yourself like this. I can practice anytime. It doesn't just rain once." It was then that Chen Mo, whether he was just angry, or if he had actually calmed down, seemed to return to normal. He managed to drive smoothly and safely back home. When Meng Yinling got out of the car, she asked Chen Mo, "Was that a success?" But at this moment, Chen Mo didn't have time to worry about his phobia. He immediately went to get her some fever medicine. "Here, take this." He also brought a thermometer to take her temperature. It was only then that he realized that her temperature was 39.5 degrees Celsius. Worried that just the fever medicine wouldn't be enough, Chen Mo asked if they should go to the hospital. But Meng Yinling didn't want Chen Mo to find out that her back injury was hurting again, so she didn't want Chen Mo to take her to the hospital. "It's okay. I'll just sleep it off." Chen Mo looked at Meng Yinling. He was worried, but he decided to trust what she said and let her rest. As it turned out, Meng Yinling ended up sleeping until noon. When the housekeeper had finished preparing lunch, Chen Mo went back to check her temperature. But her temperature had gone up instead of down. Chen Mo knew that he shouldn't have believed a word that she said. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he immediately tried to wake the woman who had a fever of 40 degrees. Chen Mo was worried that the high temperature had caused some brain damage. When he was waking her up, she finally woke up, but she was still in a haze and kept crying out in pain. Chen Mo didn't know why Meng Yinling was in pain. Until he touched her back, he realized that her injury hadn't fully healed. He also remembered that she hadn't buckled her seatbelt when he braked hard earlier. So, was all of this his fault again? Chen Mo suddenly burst into tears. He didn't know what to do. Meng Yinling seemed confused. Chen Mo didn't know if it was the fever or something else. She felt water droplets on her face. When she looked up, she saw that Chen Mo's eyes were red from crying. Meng Yinling, on the other hand, was starting to feel wronged. She watched Chen Mo frantically wiping away his tears, trying to comfort him. "Chen Mo, don't cry. It hurts to see you cry." Chen Mo thought it was her back pain and was about to call for the housekeeper when Meng Yinling pointed to her chest and spoke in a daze, but said seriously, "It hurts here." He looked at the place where her hand was resting, tears falling from his eyes. The housekeeper, seeing all of this, was able to quickly understand the situation. "Mr. Chun, please don't worry. This is something the young mistress has had since she was a child. If her fever goes above 38 degrees, she tends to become a little slow and acts a bit foolish. But she will be fine once the fever goes down. She hasn't actually turned into a fool." Hearing this, Chen Mo felt a sense of relief. Then he helped Meng Yinling out of bed to go to the hospital. But Meng Yinling wasn't wearing any shoes and her bare feet were on the floor. "Chen Mo, the floor is cold and hard. Can you carry me to bed?" If it had been the normal Meng Yinling that had said that, Chen Mo would have answered, "I think you should just sleep on the floor. The only one that I carry to bed is my daughter." But given her current state, he decided to hold back. He wiped the tears from his face and whispered to Meng Yinling, "How about we go to the hospital first, and then I'll carry you to sleep?" Meng Yinling pouted, looking as if she was about to cry. Chen Mo thought that she didn't want to go to the hospital, so he said something else. But that didn't seem to work, so he resorted to threatening her. If she didn't go, then he wouldn't carry her. After a moment, Meng Yinling looked at Chen Mo and realized that he wasn't budging. So, she sadly whispered, "Okay." But on their way to the hospital, Meng Yinling kept holding on to Chen Mo's hand. Even at the hospital, she refused to go to the examination room without holding on to him. With all the doctors and nurses staring at them, Chen Mo was starting to feel embarrassed. But there was nothing he could do. Meng Yinling refused to let go. Only when the 4-drip was in place did Meng Yinling finally fall asleep, giving Chen Mo some time to move freely. As the 4-bag dripped away, Chen Mo kept monitoring Meng Yinling's temperature. When the fever finally seemed to be going down, Chen Mo finally felt a sense of relief. He was tired from watching over her, so he ended up falling asleep beside her bed. But it was a light sleep. He woke up at the slightest sound, seeing that Meng Yinling was awake, her Ice Queen demeanor back. He couldn't help but smile when he thought about the way she had been acting during her fever. But the first thing Meng Yinling did wasn't talk to him, but asked the nurse to see if Chen Mo had caught her fever. Chen Mo was stunned. "You can catch a fever?" The nurse had the same question as Chen Mo. After a moment, Meng Yinling explained, "I woke up and he was just sitting here grinning like an idiot. Could he be running a fever?" Chen Mo understood now. Meng Yinling remembered everything that had happened, so she was angry. Chen Mo first asked the nurse to leave, before looking at Meng Yinling up and down. "Do you want me to carry you to bed now, little Yinling?" Meng Yinling's face darkened as she questioned Chen Mo. "Why do you have to add little in front of my name? You're just picking on the sick." Chen Mo was looking at Meng Yinling with complex emotions, but it was clear that Meng Yinling was the only one he could see. All right then, Yinling. Do you want me to carry you to bed?" His tone was loving and indulgent. Meng Yinling was angry, but she was very satisfied with Chen Mo's proactive advances. And she couldn't reject him. "Okay." She pretended to agree without expression, but Chen Mo could see the hint of joy playing at the corners of her mouth. Then, Chen Mo slipped into Meng Yinling's bed. Meng Yinling held Chen Mo tightly, but then she remembered her back injury. She discreetly stretched her back, her teeth clenching to hold back the pain. To put it mildly, her back hurt. To be more blunt, all the bones in her spine were throbbing, like bones sticking into her flesh. In order to not let Chen Mo realize what was going on, Meng Yinling held back her cries, but the pain was almost unbearable. Maybe it was because she had a cold, and her resistance and endurance were lower than usual. She couldn't help but moan. Chen Mo, who was in her arms, moved slightly and asked softly, "What's wrong?" His voice was even more gentle than before. Meng Yinling forced a smile. "You crashed into my heart, Chen Mo." If something seems off, then there's always a reason. She was definitely hiding something. Chen Mo could see the beads of sweat on her forehead. He knew it was because her back was in pain again. He scolded her for holding on to him so tightly. Meng Yinling laughed. "I was afraid you'd slip out of my arms." The Meng Yinling of the past wouldn't say something like that. "You wouldn't say that before." Meng Yinling pursed her lips. "That was before. Now that I'm finally with you, how can I give you a chance to run? I was with Ye Zhaozhao for all those years. I did pick up some of her tricks." Chen Mo shook his head. Now that Meng Yinling knew that everything had been resolved with Ye Zhaozhao, she still dared to mention his ex-girlfriend in front of him? "I won't run away." Meng Yinling stayed at home for almost another month to fully recover. And as soon as she was healthy, she immediately went back to work. Meng Yinling's friends had been calling her constantly while she was recovering, calling every other day. And now they were saying that since she was better, they wanted to host a welcome-back party for her. Chen Mo didn't want to go to such a lively place, so he didn't accompany Meng Yinling. But her friends weren't happy about this. "Big Miss, why haven't you brought your partner out to introduce him to us?" One of them was sprawled on the sofa, asking this question to Meng Yinling as soon as she arrived. Meng Yinling gave them a glance. "Why do you want to meet him? What if you corrupt him?" The thought that Chen Mo would turn into someone like them was making her head hurt. Even she had trouble keeping her original morals with the group. Corrupt him? Meng Yinling could only stare in disbelief at what she was saying, her hand trembling slightly. However, Meng Yinling was not looking at her. Because she couldn't see the look of disbelief on her face, her friend felt even more frustrated. So, she had no choice but to retort back to Meng Yinling, refuting her accusations. But when she was about to speak, she couldn't. After seeing how clean and handsome Chen Mo was, compared to her, she felt that she really might corrupt him. With that thought in mind, the reasons she was going to give suddenly felt weak. But even so, you should still bring him to meet us. Besides, how could we possibly corrupt your partner when you're here? The last part of her sentence was getting softer and softer. Her mind was also starting to work. And most importantly, if you don't bring him, what if he starts overthinking? Meng Yinling's eyes held a look of contempt and disdain. Chen Mo had said it himself that he didn't want to come. How could he be overthinking? He wasn't someone who liked to make a fuss over nothing. I was just... Before Meng Yinling could finish speaking, her friend continued to voice her opinion. Chapter 14. After Meng Yinling's friend spoke, they peeked up to observe Meng Yinling's expression. Seeing that she didn't look annoyed and didn't say anything, they became bolder and continued with their points. Normally, if you acknowledge someone and want to marry them, then you'll want them to meet your friends, to introduce them to your circle. Look, you haven't brought him to meet us. What if there is a wedding banquet, engagement banquet, or a baby shower, and you don't know how to introduce us? Meng Yinling thought it was reasonable and nodded. Everyone was instantly emboldened. Their facial expressions and tone of their voices became more flattering. Then, Big Miss, do you think that maybe you could pick a time to bring him out, so we can all meet? No need. I'll tell him when I get back, then I'll just show him pictures of all of you. In that instant, everyone's hearts dropped when they heard what she said. They were already in pain, but what her friends didn't know was that it would only get worse. Chen Mo only needs to know me. There is no need for him to know you. Her arrogant expression and the provoking words were making everyone's teeth itch. But that's just Meng Yinling's personality. They had all put up with it all these years. They just felt a bit helpless. After all, their fighting prowess was too weak to beat the overpowered Meng Yinling. All the times they were defeated in the past told them not to be impulsive. They had also guaranteed that nothing bad would happen tonight. Meng Yinling thought about it, and they were right. It would be good for them to meet each other. So, she finally decided to bring Chen Mo along, so everyone could be acquainted. But this would only be a one-time thing. The city's nights were especially bustling. The dazzling lights of the tall buildings were hard to ignore. The noisy clamor was also always present. But it slowly faded as they approached their destination. Meng Yinling then gave a simple introduction to Chen Mo. These three grew up with me. Don't feel that you have to be polite to them. If they dare to bully you, I'll take care of them. The white light was falling on Chen Mo's face, making him seem even more handsome and refined. Looking at her surroundings, Meng Yinling was quite pleased with the setting. The girl had finally done something right for once. Why are you all so elegant tonight? You didn't even book a place at a bar. You get a bad rating from me. Yeah. Could it be that you were partying too hard before, so now you need to take a break and change venues? Everyone didn't reply to the taunts. They even wanted to laugh. They could only remind the other side, after looking at Meng Yinling's face. Given Meng Yinling's attitude, they felt that she might think that they would lead her partner astray. Don't say that. There will be a big surprise later. I suggest that you watch your words, or you will regret it later. Unfortunately, no one listened. They continued to taunt her. Everyone shook their heads, feeling helpless. They couldn't help but sigh at how useless their teammates were. They had done their part in warning them. They could do no more. The voices inside could be heard outside through the slightly open door. Meng Yinling and Chen Mo happened to have walked up to the door, so they could hear the conversation clearly. Meng Yinling's face turned dark. What were they talking about? Looking at Chen Mo's expression, she grew even colder. There was no risk of them corrupting Chen Mo. It was just that Meng Yinling didn't want Chen Mo to know that they frequently went to bars. It seems that she wasn't too successful in hiding it. Chen Mo wondered why Meng Yinling hadn't gone inside. What's wrong? Aren't we going in? After he pushed the door open, the loud chatter from the inside disappeared, and the three people inside were in sync. They all looked in the direction of the door. Big Miss is finally here. I was wondering why you chose such a nice room. The man who spoke was wearing casual clothes. He had a very kind face that gave people a very gentle feeling. But after he saw Meng Yinling's face that was as dark as charcoal and Chen Mo behind her, he was completely stunned. Fatty, am I seeing things? That guy next to Big Miss, isn't that Ye Zhaozhao's ex-boyfriend? He rubbed his eyes in disbelief, but there was no change. He immediately asked his friend for help. His friend tried to explain things. It is what it is. You should just stop talking about that. Seeing Meng Yinling's face getting darker, someone started to panic. Meng Yinling could mention Ye Zhaozhao herself, but that doesn't mean anyone else can mention Ye Zhaozhao in front of Chen Mo. The others were complaining. Why was this guy so oblivious today? He quickly went forward, reaching out to cover his friend's mouth, stopping him from saying any more. Then he looked towards Chen Mo, put on his most beautiful smile, and spoke loudly. Hello, brother-in-law. I'm called Li Zhe. When Li Zhe was speaking, he purposely leaned into his friend's ear, afraid that he wouldn't hear him. Then the three of them sat upright at the table, especially the loudmouth, Cheng Nan, who was shaking in fear. Thinking about how he had spoken earlier, Cheng Nan felt like he was about to die. Hello, brother-in-law. I'm called Gu Qing. Gu Qing was still relatively calm. After all, Cheng Nan had made a big fool of himself earlier. Her words weren't as memorable. Hello, I'm Chen Mo. Chen Mo felt a bit ashamed when they called him brother-in-law. After all, he and Meng Yinling weren't married yet. Cheng Nan stood up shakily and looked at Chen Mo a couple of times. Hello, brother-in-law. I'm called Cheng Nan. Everyone calls me Fatty. You can call me that too. If you ever need any help, just ask me. No, ask your wife instead. Cheng Nan had originally wanted to cling to his leg, but after seeing the look in Meng Yinling's eyes, he quickly changed what he was going to say. The fear that had left them when they were talking badly about her had come rushing back. Chapter 15. Cheng Nan wanted to slap himself a few times. Really, with Miss Meng here, did he really think that she needed his help? Our Miss Meng knows the sky and the land. She's an expert in everything. You can ask her all of your questions, and she'll definitely help you solve them. Cheng Nan looked at Meng Yinling as he was praising her. Chen Mo listened very intently, nodding in agreement with what Cheng Nan was saying. But in reality, Chen Mo already saw through the fact that they were afraid of Meng Yinling, so they were trying to play nice. Meng Yinling's expression had been stiff since she entered the room. It was likely because she was angry about the bar. Chen Mo felt that he needed to do something to lighten the mood. So he tilted his head and said, I know. Yinling can solve everything well. It was a statement that even Chen Mo found a little nauseating. Meng Yinling opened her mouth as if to say something, but didn't. She then looked away from Chen Mo's face. Did Chen Mo know how beautiful his smile was? His eyes were like small crescents, and his white teeth were barely visible from his thin lips. Chen Mo tilted his head slightly, and with his bright smile, it was really hard to resist. He noticed that Meng Yinling's earlobes, which were a pale pink, had now turned a bright red. Chen Mo smiled even more happily. Meng Yinling finally realized that Chen Mo was trying to please her. All her anger disappeared. Seeing that the atmosphere had instantly lightened, Cheng Nan found an opportunity to strike while the iron was hot. Brother-in-law, Fatty would like to propose a toast to you, wishing you and Miss Ming a long life and eternal love. Li Zhe was holding a wine glass and presented it to Chen Mo. Chen Mo was a bit stunned, but he smiled and picked up the wine glass in front of him. Chen Mo can't drink. I'll drink for her. Meng Yinling stopped Cheng Nan from handing the glass to Chen Mo, but Chen Mo then stopped Meng Yinling from drinking the glass. He then looked at Meng Yinling with a smile. Yinling, this is Fatty's toast to our long-lasting love and eternal life. Meng Yinling didn't quite understand what Chen Mo meant. Then Chen Mo continued, even if I can't drink, it should still be me that drinks. After he finished speaking, everyone began to cheer. Wasn't it obvious that he was saying that he was willing to marry Meng Yinling? Meng Yinling was lost in her joy, completely unsure of what to say or do, because she had been waiting for this for a long time. Cheng Nan urged Meng Yinling to hand the glass to Chen Mo. Meng Yinling was still a bit stunned, but Chen Mo, who couldn't drink, took the glass and drank it all in one go. Then Chen Mo stood up, taking something out of his pocket. Then he opened it in front of everyone. It was 2 custom-made rings. Meng Yinling's friends were stunned. Was their brother-in-law proposing to the big miss? Chen Mo, with the rings in hand, placed one of them on Meng Yinling's finger before asking, "Will you marry me, Yinling?" Meng Yinling then realized, no wonder why Chen Mo didn't want to come to the welcome back party, but ended up coming. Was it to get the rings? Meng Yinling smiled and replied, "I do." Maybe she had been willing to a long time ago. The end.